Chapter 274. In the end, the four sects didn't really shed all pretense of cordiality. Although the non-phase master and disciples' cynical ridicule made the other three sects' elders completely embarrassed, at least they managed to maintain the situation at the level of verbal bombardment rather than a more tragic level. Lingjian school didn't have the intention to shed all pretense of cordiality, because the next thing to do was a big thing, which needed the support of the other sects, especially Xingjing's sect. Just like everyone had realized, this huge treasure trove was not something that could be monopolized by any one sect, and it was even not something that could be monopolized by the four sects that were present. According to the star chart, there were thousands upon thousands of immortal treasures. And in theory, since this place was formed by Dixian's reversal of the world's main path, the immortal treasures were, in fact, inexhaustible. The so-called thousands upon thousands was not the total number of immortal treasures, but the number that could be mined at the same time. In other words, if there were thousands upon thousands of elite adventurers comparable to Wang Lu, it was possible to mine thousands upon thousands of immortal treasures at once. Of course, even if they searched the entire Wanxian League, how many people like Wang Lu could they find? This kind of immortal abode was absolutely not something that could be monopolized by any one sect. Moreover, there was not much meaning in monopolizing it. The benefits that you could get would not increase. Instead, it would cause the world's cultivators to lose a great opportunity. This was completely harming others without benefiting oneself. Once the news was leaked, it would instead provoke the world's resentment. Therefore, the solution to this matter was to share it. Not only with the three sects of Xingjing sect, Kunlun sect, but also with the more than 1,300 sects of the Wanxian League, Shaoqi sect. Lingjian school intended to announce this news to the world. Of course, this was not out of any eagerness for justice, but to seek a greater benefit. As long as one put in effort, it was possible to obtain immortal treasures in an immortal level tomb, which was tantamount to immortal abode, enough to make the world's people scramble like ducks. And once the world's people scramble like ducks, an excellent opportunity to get rich would follow. Throughout the ages, the richest person had always been the one who distributed the wealth, not the one who created it. Instead of risking one's life and diligently digging in the millions of tombs, it was better to directly summon all the cultivators in the world to enter the tombs and dig out the treasures. Then they would take a cut from it and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. The percentage of the cut wouldn't be too much. As long as they took 10% of the harvest, it would accumulate into an abnormally rich harvest. Of course, there had to be an explanation for this 10% cut. Otherwise, it would be considered robbery. Perhaps everyone could accept it in the beginning, but not long after, they would question why they would want a share of the treasures that they had worked so hard and risked their lives to obtain. However, this problem was not difficult to solve. The star map that Wang Lu projected was the best reason. We have a map. Do you want it? If you don't want it, you have to promise me a tenth of the profits. TSK, your courage is commendable. In this dangerous place where you can die at any time, one more piece of information means one more chance of survival. Are you sure you don't want it? As for the act of buying a copy of the map and casually spreading it, first of all, it was against the harmony of heaven. Reading it was one thing, but spreading a pirated copy could easily lead to a divine tribulation, so usually no one dared to try it. Secondly, the structure of Dixian's tomb was not fixed. In addition to the initial ancient sword tomb, the rest of the tombs had to be built according to the situation of these cultivators. The test checkpoints, guardian monsters, and the final reward were all randomly generated. Thus, the content of the map was naturally not fixed. In essence, it was more like a set of exquisite calculations. As long as the situation of the cultivators who entered the tomb was inserted into the map, one could roughly speculate the situation that might be encountered in the tomb. The tens of millions of tombs that Dixian built had tens of millions of different calculations. Wang Lu only sold one map at a time, so simple duplication was meaningless. However, these were only technical issues. To truly unify the resources of the 9 regions' immortal cultivation world and establish such a tax mechanism, relying on one sect alone was absolutely not enough. Especially with the sparse population of Lingjian school, it was even more powerless. Therefore, it must pull in Xingjing sect, the leader of the immortal cultivation world. Of course, Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, the 2 sects of the 5 uniques, couldn't be left behind. Otherwise, in practice, if these 2 giants kept hindering them, they wouldn't be able to play. Of course, the above was just the basic idea. To really establish such a set of game rules, it needed a lot of work. In short, let's set up a special committee first. During the silence, the one with the highest status, Feng Yin, opened his mouth. With our 4 sects as the leader, along with Royal Soldier Sect, Myriad Appearance Sect and other top-rank sects, we will jointly form a special committee to deal with all matters in this underground immortal tomb. The committee will not be under the jurisdiction of any organization and will operate independently. The number of members will be no more than 50. There will be 5 standing committee seats as well as a chairman. The term of office and election method are to be determined. However, the first chairman will be me and later on it will be rotated. When these words came out, the elders of the other 3 sects looked at each other in dismay. They were not in a hurry to answer. For this kind of strategic matter, they couldn't make a decision on behalf of their sections. Thus, they had to use their own magical ability and immediately contact their respective sect leaders. A moment later, the leaders of the other sects sent back a message. They had no objection to Feng Yin Taoist Master's proposal. After all, Feng Yin Taoist Master's proposal was generally fair. Although directly taking the position of the first chairman seemed a bit tyrannical, after all, the core part of the whole set of game rules was owned by Lingjian School. Thus, it was natural for them to have more benefits. It was believed that in the future, among the 50 committee members, although Lingjian School had the least number of people, the proportion of the committee members would not be lower than any other sect. Of course, the specific establishment of the committee still needed to be discussed separately. However, this idea has been approved by 4 of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, so it was basically passed. The next question was, what about the key? No matter how excited everyone was to think about the future, the premise of all this was that everyone at least had to be able to enter the tomb. Now that the key to open the door was unfortunately lost, if they couldn't find it, no matter what they said, it would be useless. This was also the main reason why Lingjian School wanted to unite all the sections. After more than 10,000 years, to find an unknown key was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even Feng Yin Taoist Master's star diffraction technique couldn't find any clues. Thus, they could only widely mobilize the masses and cast a net to catch it. According to Sword Demon, the key itself was an immortal treasure. It shouldn't be an ordinary item on the continent. Moreover, its magical power was related to the creation of heaven and earth, so it was very likely to be a space-time immortal treasure. But even so, only a few sects could unite and mobilize all the immortals in the world to have a hope of finding the key in a short period of time. Similarly, the search for the key was also a matter of competition and cooperation. It was true that everyone worked together, but the party who obtained the key in the end would undoubtedly have a larger share in the committee. And this was also one of the reasons why Feng Yin Taoist Master didn't ask for too much of the committee's authority. If Lingjian School had already obtained the key at this time, how could they be satisfied with a limited term of office as the chairman of the committee? It was reasonable to have at least 3 out of 5 standing committee members. However, since they didn't have the key, they would have to wait until they found the key. Of course, everyone knew that in the process of looking for the key, Lingjian School certainly had a certain advantage in clues, but the advantage was not obvious. Otherwise, wouldn't it be better for them to conceal the information about the key? After the important matter was settled, the people of the 4 sects went their separate ways and arranged their disciples to look for a needle in a haystack. The Lingjian School also cleaned up the mess, and the elders led their disciples back to the mountain to recuperate. In this experiential learning in the ancient sword tomb, Lingjian School was undoubtedly the biggest winner. In addition to the untapped Dixian inheritance, the several successor disciples also obtained great benefits. Needless to say, Wang Lu and Zhu Shiyao, although their injuries were not light, after their injuries were healed, their cultivation base could advance by leaps and bounds. Lu Li, on the other hand, obtained a suitable high-rank spiritual treasure flying sword. Her harvest was no less than that of Wang Lu and Zhu Shiyao. Although there were many flying swords in her hands, their level was actually not high, they were just magical treasures. Because spiritual treasure usually had its own spirituality. However, Lu Li's brilliant sword heart had extremely harsh requirements for the characteristics of the flying sword, which very few spiritual treasures could meet. Although Lingjian School searched in every possible way, they never found a suitable one. Therefore, they simply replaced it with a lower-level magical treasure. However, this time Lu Li was self-reliant. After Wang Lu went deep into the last level, she was bored, so she casually wandered around the ancient sword tomb. If Wang Lu was still here, he would certainly scold her for courting death. However, perhaps her luck was really deep. In a remote stone room, she actually found a broken sword that seemed to have been abandoned for a long time. When she picked up the sword actually bloomed with dazzling brilliance, revealing the nature of a high-rank spiritual treasure, which was highly compatible with Lu Li. Later, after being identified by the sect elders, it was discovered that it was the famous sword of the sword demon, Skybreaker. It was originally an immortal treasure. However, in the process of resisting the 4 and 9 divine tribulations, the sword spirit perished and the sword body was damaged. Thus, it was brought to the ancient sword tomb by its master to be slowly nurtured by the power of the feng shui line. After 10,000 years, the sword body has basically been repaired. Although the sword spirit could not be reborn, it didn't affect the quality of the flying sword. Moreover, it just met Lu Li's requirement of a blank flying sword. Although the quality of this immortal sword has not been fully restored, as long as Lu Li diligently refined it, sooner or later, it would be able to regain its former glory. Its actual value was far higher than the one that Zhu Shiyao previously obtained. It was truly a priceless treasure. Regarding this, even Wang Lu was slightly envious. Although he certainly wouldn't covet Lu Li, he couldn't help but want to borrow it and play with it. Lu Li of course agreed. Okay, you can play with Miao. Wait a minute, what's Miao? Lu Li said, it's this flying sword. Master said that since the original sword spirit is no longer here, it's equivalent to a new flying sword. So, as its master, I have to give it a new name. So it's called Miao? Wang Lu was speechless. He shook his head and took the Miao sword from Lu Li. The reason why he borrowed the sword from Lu Li was mainly to comprehend the essence of the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword from this sword of the sword demon. Now that the sword spirit was no longer here, perhaps the harvest would be very limited, but it was better than nothing. However, as soon as his palm touched the hilt, he felt a burst of dizziness in his head, as if he was hit by a heavy hammer. He couldn't think at all. Wang Lu hastily threw the sword back to Lu Li and asked, "What's the matter with this sword?" Lu Li said, "Master said that once this sword is refined, it will be connected with my mind and the sword and I become one. Although I don't quite understand what it means, it should be a good thing, right?" "No, your master's meaning is actually very simple. This sword, in addition to you, if other people hold it, their IQ will drop." Chapter 275. After returning to the mountain, life was not as leisurely as expected. Although he had just recovered from a serious injury and needed to recuperate the most, and at the same time the combination of primal chaos heaven-splitting sword and non-phase method also needed to be steadily studied, it was reasonable to say that Wang Lu should go into closed-door training for a long time. However, there were too many things that the sect needed Wang Lu to participate in, so he could not shirk it. After a short rest for a day or two, Wang Lu threw himself into the intense work. Although the proposal to set up a special committee to deal with Dishan's legacy was put forward by Feng Yin Taoist master, the original framework actually came from Wang Lu's idea. Moreover, Wang Lu also grasped the most critical element, the Star Atlas. Therefore, Wang Lu himself was duty-bound to participate in it. It could be said that the most critical reason why Lingjian School was able to get Xingjing sect to recognize its position in the committee was because of this Star Atlas. When Sword Demon projected the map image in Wang Lu's primordial spirit, he actually left behind a very mysterious seed. The more he studied it, the more he found out that it was infinitely mysterious. It was by no means a simple projection. In the future, when they found the key to open Dishan's tomb, Lingjian School could have a far higher efficiency than other sects by relying on this Star Atlas. And this benefit was not intended to be monopolized by Lingjian School. Now that the committee was established, it was just the right time to use this resource to win over allies. And when it came to such an important outreach work, how could Wang Lu, as the person involved, stay out of it? After returning to the mountain for a full month, he followed the sect leader Feng Yin around, contacting various sections. In addition to the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, he also frequently contacted Wanxiang sect and other top-ranked sections. 2 months later, after numerous meetings and consultations, the overall framework of the committee was finally established. The committee was called the 9 Regions Tombs of Immortals Excavation Management Committee, or Excavation Management Committee for short. Among the 50 or so committee members, the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League took up 3/5 of the 30 spots, and the Lingjian School alone took up 10 spots. Other than the 9 elders that were often seen in the Heavenly Sword Hall, even Wang Lu was included. It was reasonable to say that only Yuanying stage cultivators could participate in this kind of committee meeting. The reason why the 5th elder of Spirit Sword sect could be one of them was because she was the number 1 king pill in 9 regions. As for Wang Lu, who was not even a king pill, it was simply a miracle that he could be one of them. This also showed how influential Lingjian School was in the committee. 2 months ago, in the ancient sword tomb, of course, it was impossible to reach this step. In the past 2 months, the hard work of the duo of Feng Yin Taoist master and Wang Lu could not go unnoticed. As for the standing committee members, they were represented by the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. The influence of these 5 sects was superb. Although the other sects had their complaints, they could do nothing about it. When the list of the committee members was completely established and the rules of procedure were preliminarily drawn up, it was already 2 months later. Through Wang Lu's proposal, the first meeting of the Excavation Management Committee was arranged on a ship. Of course, it was not an ordinary cruise ship, but a giant spaceship sponsored by Xinjing sect, which could be called the most luxurious one in 9 regions. It was an ancient immortal tool that Xinjing sect people accidentally obtained when they excavated the immortal tomb. In its glorious period, it could soar in the sky like a dark cloud and release tens of thousands of golden armored soldiers. The bow of the ship was even installed with a land-sinking cannon. Let alone destroying a city, even sinking a corner of the continent was as easy as turning one's hand. Unfortunately, after experiencing the Age of Chaos, all of the combat devices on the spaceship have been damaged. Moreover, because of the change in the surrounding spiritual energy, it could no longer be repaired. Now, through the efforts of Xinjing sect people, it could finally fly again. However, first, it had no combat capability, second, its flying speed was extremely slow, and it lacked the transportation capability. Finally, it was used by Xinjing sect people as a sect welfare for the elders and outstanding disciples to use for vacation and leisure. Xinjing sect people were rich and overbearing, so they modified this giant spaceship to be resplendent with all the necessary facilities. When it flew, it glittered with golden light, as if there was another sun in the sky. The Xinjing sect proudly called it the Rising Sun Fortress, while the other cultivators enviously called it local tycoon gold. Every day they hoped that when it flew, it would encounter the astral winds of the 9th heaven or the dark clouds of thunder tribulation, thus falling down to their satisfaction. Wang Lu chose this place as the venue for the meeting, which was strongly supported by Xinjing sect. Although it was reasonable to say that Spirit Sword sect and Xinjing sect had various kinds of grievances, in the face of big benefits, the past contradictions were like passing clouds. Now that the excavation management had been established, it was the time when the morale of the members was condensed and everyone was united. In order to show their sincerity and strength, under the instruction of Hichu Daoren, Xinjing sect signed a long-term preferential lease contract with the excavation management, renting out this local tycoon gold giant spaceship for public use. At the same time, the insiders could also enjoy a very low discount for private use. In the first meeting, almost all of the more than 50 committee members were present. When they landed on the Rising Sun Fortress, most of them felt that their pair of dog eyes had been blinded. Wang Lu also repeatedly clicked his tongue, thinking that his cloud wave boat might as well be sold at a low price. But then he thought, if he were to defect to Xinjing sect now, what kind of price tag would the opposite party offer? In any case, he was a well-known person in 9 regions. Xinjing sect, this kind of rich and overbearing sect, might be able to offer quite a generous premium. As for the agenda of the meeting, there was nothing to write home about. First of all, the chairman, Feng Yin Taoist master, gave a speech and made a work report, completing the basic work of establishing rules and regulations. Then Wang Lu, as the representative of the party concerned, made a special report to the meeting, which described in detail the formation principle of the group of immortal tombs and so on. Then the meeting arranged the work of looking for the key, the initial establishment of the information exchange channel. As for the further work, it could only be discussed at the next meeting. After a day of meeting, Xinjing sect hosted the excavation management to investigate and research on the Rising Sun Fortress for 3 days. After that, the guests and the host were happy and happily left. During this period, a great elder of Xinjing sect paid a special visit to Wang Lu and gave him a thoughtful gift. I heard that you have an immortal beast friend. I hope this book can help her. At the same time, I also hope that the past misunderstanding will not affect our future cooperation. Looking at the amiable smile of Supreme Tianyu in front of him, Wang Lu sincerely admired the face of Xinjing sect people. A few months ago they were still as harsh and rude as a bandit, but today, unexpectedly, they could put down their face and apologize to him as a Supreme of Unity stage. It was no wonder that Supreme Tianyu, who was known for being rude and unreasonable, could still muddle along until today. To put it bluntly, this guy had the face of a villain. But to put it nicely, his skill of making the best use of the situation was really profound. For Tianyu's gift, Wang Lu calmly accepted it. The book was written by Tianyu himself, which recorded his experience as a demon cultivator, from the opening of his spiritual wisdom to the promotion to unity stage. Although in terms of foundation and aptitude, Tianyu was far from being comparable to the immortal beast by Shi Xian, the cultivation experience of a Supreme of Unity stage still had its value. Accepting the book could be considered as having settled a grudge for the time being. After playing on the airship for a few days, Wang Lu followed his uncle's sect leader back to Spirit Sword Mountain. This time he could finally relax after returning to the mountain. The key task of the Excavation Management Committee, searching for the key, was not something that could be completed in 3 or 5 days, so there was no need to rush. After being busy for a few months, Feng Yin Taoist Master also proposed to take a break for a period of time. Therefore Wang Lu finally had the time to sort out his own cultivation. Of course he had no choice but to sort it out. The direct cause of this matter was when he returned to Spirit Sword Mountain after the meeting, he received the letter of challenge from his big sister, Zhu Shiyao. Big sister was a straightforward person. She would do whatever she wanted to do without too much consideration. In the ancient sword tomb, she fought against Wang Lu several times, but there was no clear winner. After the injury of her primordial spirit was healed, she couldn't help but want to decide the winner between her and Wang Lu. Unfortunately, Wang Lu has been busy with the committee's work and had no time to deal with her. At this time, seeing that Wang Lu had some free time, Zhu Shiyao could no longer hold back. In this regard, Wang Lu calmly accepted it. Although his big sister's stellar divine eyes were indeed powerful, his broken sword world was also not a small matter. As the biggest winner in the ancient sword tomb, he already had enough confidence. However, after the fight, the result was somewhat unexpected. Wang Lu did win, but it was because of the opponent's mistake. Zhu Shiyao slightly wavered at the critical moment, and Wang Lu took the opportunity to defeat her. Later on, when he asked, it turned out that Zhu Shiyao's primordial spirit was advancing by leaps and bounds, and her stage was not stable. She was eager to fight, so regardless of her poor condition, she asked her master to help lock her primordial spirit, which could only bring out 60 to 70% of her ability. As a result, in the fierce fight, her fighting spirit surged up and accidentally broke her master's seal. Suddenly, her primordial spirit shook and revealed its flaw, which made her extremely regrettable loss. Thus, the quality of this victory was really discounted. The opponent's primordial spirit was only able to bring out 60 to 70% of its ability, which was simply an unfair victory. However, this was purely Zhu Shiyao's own fault. In short, Wang Lu knew that his progress was indeed not small, but if he slightly relaxed, he would be overtaken by others. Whether it was Zhu Shiyao or Lu Li, their strength was advancing by leaps and bounds, and their future was bright. However, he himself seemed to be standing at the crossroads, and his future was still hazy. In the ancient sword tomb, his biggest harvest was the group of immortal tombs. However, as an individual, his main harvest was the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword that was passed down by Sword Demon. Regardless of whether Sword Demon taught him this set of method for possession or something else, there was no problem with the method itself. Moreover, what was even more rare was, after leaving the ancient sword tomb, it didn't lose its effect because of the change in the surrounding spiritual energy. This was a divine sword that could be passed down through the ages, so its value was beyond doubt. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a true immortal level sword technique. However, on the other hand, right before his eyes, his master personally demonstrated the awe-inspiring might of her non-phase method. The 4 sect's elders were helpless against the 4 and 9 divine tribulations, but she was able to overcome them all the way. Even Sword Demon himself was full of praise for her non-phase method, saying that it might not be suitable for him. However, now it seemed that if he could successfully cultivate the non-phase method, he could even withstand the 4 and 9 divine tribulations, which seemed to be a road for him. Just like in the instance when other people were painstakingly studying how to push down the guardian monster, he could directly withstand the monster's attack to open the treasure chest, take away the loot, and then turn around to leave. Thinking about it, it was simply too awesome. So, you came to ask for my opinion? On the non-phase peak, Wang Wu had nothing to say about her disciple's diligence and inquisitiveness. You have the nerve to mention this matter in front of me. I have painstakingly taught you immortal cultivation for 10 years, and I have been wholeheartedly devoted to you. However, in the blink of an eye, you changed your mind and became infatuated with this inexplicable heaven-splitting divine sword. And now, you even shamelessly come to ask for my opinion? Wang Lu was silent for a moment. It shows that I still have feelings for you. Bah. Feelings my ass. You're obviously having an affair. Wang Lu thought for a moment and then decided to cut the Gordian knot. Recently, Wisdom Sect is in a tight spot, so they have to borrow a huge amount of money from the mysterious Sky Mansion, so their liquidity is basically gone. His master's fierce imposing manner suddenly softened. Oh, forget it. It's the primal chaos heaven-splitting divine sword. If you want to learn it, then learn it. After all, non-phase method is a cultivation method that I created under extreme conditions, so its limitation is not small. You have outstanding talent, so having your own ideas is also a good thing. Wang Lu said, Master, no matter what, this is an immortal level cultivation method. Are you not interested in learning it? Humph, what's wrong with an immortal level cultivation method? Is it rare? Wang Wu indifferently said, in our Lingjian school, the immortal level cultivation method is actually not limited to stellar sword method and brilliant sword heart. When a cultivator's cultivation base reaches a certain level, there's no need to covet other people's cultivation method. Whether it's an immortal level cultivation method or any other level, the one that suits you is the best. However, right now you haven't even succeeded in cultivating the king pill, so you can't say that you have your own path, so there's no harm in dabbling in it. However, because of this, I suggest you not to rush to cultivate the king pill. Wang Lu nodded. I also have the same intention. In the ancient sword tomb, after absorbing the sea of bitterness left behind by the sword demon, Wang Lu could take this opportunity to quickly advance his cultivation base. In about 3 to 5 years he could successfully cultivate the king pill. However, achieving the king pill was by no means a trivial matter. For most of the cultivators in 9 regions, it was a lifelong dream that was difficult to reach. For those cultivators with extraordinary talents, the golden core stage was also a stage that determined their fate. When a cultivator successfully cultivated the king pill, they would initially combine the great Tao of heaven and earth, and then form their own path. After that, Yuanying, deity, and so on were all changes in the cultivator's life essence, but they would no longer be separated from the Tao established by the king pill. Therefore Wang Wu's double king pill was shocking. Just like how a loyal minister would not serve 2 masters, a cultivator would not walk 2 paths at the same time. Now it seemed that behind the awe-inspiring divine power, there must be a great side effect. For example, her failure to advance to Yuanying might be related to it. Wang Wu did not intend to let her disciple repeat her own mistakes, so she could not afford to lose the king pill. Combining the advantages of heaven-splitting sword and non-phase method to form a unique cultivation method system, the idea is indeed good, but whether it is really suitable or not, it needs to be tested by time. Although this time your senior sister did not have the glory as you did, the benefits she got were no less than you. She also knows primal chaos heaven-splitting sword, and the sword spirit root is easier to absorb and digest. Her primordial spirit cultivation base has advanced by leaps and bounds, and soon she will condense her body. Her strength can be said to have advanced by leaps and bounds, so, in addition to cultivating in the mountain, you'd better take the time to gain experiential learning. Aren't you looking for the key now? It's a rare opportunity to gain experiential learning at public expense. Wang Wu said and then gently took a sip of tea. Don't worry, look for it slowly. Chapter 276. His master's words came true. The excavation management's search for the key progressed very slowly. 3 years had passed since the establishment of the excavation management and the first meeting. According to the rules of the excavation management, the term of office of the chairman was only 10 years. In a trance, Feng Yin Taoist master's impassioned speech at the first meeting, looking forward to a better future, still appeared in front of them. However, 3 years later the initial enthusiasm gradually faded, and the problem surfaced. That legendary key, where was it? 3 years was not a long time, it was far from enough for the cultivators of the excavation management to search the entire land of the 9 prefectures. This key that had been missing for more than 10,000 years was destined to not be found so easily. However, after 3 whole years, not even a single clue was found. It was inevitable that people would be discouraged and even criticize it. In the past 3 years, under the leadership of Taoist Master Feng Yin, almost all the large and small sects of the Union of 10,000 Immortals participated in the search, which consumed countless manpower and material resources. In just a few years, the maintenance cost of the Rising Sun Fortress was about to become astronomical. However, the search was fruitless. The key was still nowhere to be found. Moreover, the more they searched, the more desperate they became. Because in the past 3 years, people had checked one immortal treasure after another. Xingjing sect even opened their treasure house and checked dozens of immortal treasures, regardless of whether they could be used or not, one by one. However, in the end, not even the slightest clue was found. There was an ancient fable that was passed down from the Western continent. It said that in order to select the right material, an inventor made more than 3,000 failed experiments. However, he used each failure as the cornerstone of victory, and finally he succeeded. However, in fact, a fable was just a story. In practice, let alone more than 3,000 failures, even 300 or even 30 times were enough. If you don't believe it, if someone suddenly failed while having sex with his girlfriend 1 or 2 times was fine, but after failing 3,000 times in a row, do you think the other party would wait for the 3,001st time to regain their masculinity? Taoist Master Feng Yin was facing such a predicament. In the past 3 years, it could be said that there was almost no progress. In addition to the increasingly bloated organizational structure of the Excavation Management Committee and the increasingly beautiful promise of the future, there was no substantial progress. Thus people began to doubt. Was the spiritual master of Lingjian school really reliable? Even though his personal cultivation wasn't bad, and he was also the head of one of the 5 uniques, but Lingjian school's population was sparse, and their interactions with the outside world were not ordinary. Among the 5 uniques, it was publicly acknowledged that they were relatively backward and closed off. In this kind of sect, their management level was naturally unable to be reflected. Furthermore, Feng Yin Taoist master had been the chairman of the Excavation Management Committee for the past 3 years, and his work progress was close to zero, which seemed to prove this point. This pressure was nothing to Feng Yin, who had experienced great storms and waves, but he couldn't really remain indifferent. Thus, this perfected deity stage cultivator frequently used the star diffraction technique to forcefully search for clues. With his level, if he were to seriously deduce, ordinary celestial treasures wouldn't be able to hide at all. However, after 3 years, Feng Yin didn't find anything, and even he himself was slightly discouraged. On this day he once again failed to deduce anything. In desperation he called Wang Lu over and asked him to tell him what he saw and heard that day. After all, the person who talked to Zhong Xingming was Wang Lu, not him. Tell me the conversation that day again, and see if there are any clues that we haven't found yet. Wang Lu sighed and said, Sect Master Sherbua, I have already answered this question no less than 10 times. You can also recite the conversation between me and Zhong Xingming. Why do you still ask? Feng Yin said, This time, tell me in a different tone, I'll try to find some inspiration. Wang Lu helplessly said, Sect Master, people who can't. Even if the bed partner changes to 48 positions, it's still impossible to make the eunuch rise. The sect leader was even unable to get angry at this kind of treacherous words and deeds that compared the sect leader to a eunuch. Thinking about it, Wang Lu's words were not unreasonable. Over the past few days he had really racked his brains and deduced all the possibilities. He did not even hesitate to go to the savage land, but he still found nothing. This was not a problem that could be solved simply by hard work. In fact, if hard work could solve the problem, why would he be criticized for 3 years? Thinking of this, the sect leader's heart was moved and he decided to take a risk. What? Sect leader, are you kidding me? You want to find 8th junior brother? In the Spirit Pool Peaks Assembly Hall, when the regular elders' meeting was about to end, the second elder Lucien was surprised to hear the request of the sect leader. The other elders also stared with round eyes, waiting for the further explanation of the sect leader. Feng Yin also had a helpless look. It's about the group of immortal tombs. I'm at a loss here, so I can only consider letting the professionals do it. Senior brother, you must not. The third elder Feng He sternly interrupted. Although the group of immortal tombs is of great importance, Dishan's inheritance is, after all, just a worldly possession. An 8th junior brother? The price is too heavy, we must not be careless. Feng Yin wryly smiled. If even you say that, then it's just superstition. Feng He's voice was even louder. Senior brother, even if there's no reliable theory to support it, but the fact is better than all the theory, this is not wrong. With that, Feng He shook his head. He felt that his harsh words were too rude to the sect leader, so he hurriedly apologized and then lowered his voice. 8th junior brother's treasure hunting ability is indeed disdainful of the world, but every time he goes out to explore and collect ancient treasures, he would inevitably cause great trouble. 80 years ago he found the immortal treasure Red Gourd, but it also released the Golden Horned King, a remnant of the demon race from the Great War of Immortals and Demons. 70 years ago he looked for a summoned beast and provoked a strange beast from overseas. 60 years ago he accidentally broke the insect poison in the Western continent, which led to a biochemical crisis. The last time 50 years ago was... Okay, we all know about 8th junior brother's great achievements. Seeing that the atmosphere in the meeting hall was getting more and more gloomy, the second elder, Lucien, quickly interrupted the third elder's recollection. Feng Yin sighed, nodded and said, Third brother, I understand what you mean, I don't intend to let him act, but it's a pity to not use his treasure hunting ability. It's better to find him first and ask for his opinion. Rest assured, it's just to ask for advice, I won't let him go out of the mountain. Feng He was obviously still worried, but since sect leader's senior brother had said it like this, it was not convenient for him to refute. Not to mention that he was also a member of the excavation management, so he was very clear about the pressure his senior brother was under. After the meeting, Feng Yin Taoist master summoned his 8th junior brother to Stellar Peak to ask for advice. Not long after, a young man in luxurious clothes ran in excitedly. "Senior brother, I heard that you're looking for an immortal treasure, but you can't find it no matter what? Don't worry, leave it to me. As long as you tell me the basic characteristics of this thing, I will find it for you within a month." While talking, the young man untied the wine gourd from his waist and drank half of the gourd in one go. His face turned red and he looked extremely excited. "Senior brother, just say it, I'll go now. Never procrastinate." All these years, because the 8th elder went out to look for treasures, he constantly stirred up trouble and was forbidden to go out of the mountain by the Heavenly Sword Hall. At this time, when he heard from his 5th senior sister that the sex prohibition might be loosened, he was immediately excited. Seeing this scene, Feng Yin Taoist master also had a headache. "Alas, you should know about the group of immortal tombs." "Oh, the group of immortal tombs, I seem to be a member of the excavation management. However, I only attended the first meeting and before I could enjoy myself I was dragged back by senior brother." Feng Yin angrily said, "Nonsense, otherwise when you go to Xingjing sect at night, wouldn't you provoke an unmanageable big trouble? I won't be discovered. Do you think Xingjing sect people are just decorations?" Feng Yin scolded him a few times and then changed the topic. "So far there's no clue about the key to the group of immortal tombs. I've used the stellar star diffraction technique to deduce it hundreds of times, and I've personally traveled all over the 9 regions, but all along I haven't been able to gain anything. According to Wang Lu, the key must exist, moreover, it's an immortal treasure. However, after 3 years of fruitless search, could it be that he's wrong?" When it came to business, the 8th elder's complexion suddenly turned serious. "Senior brother, speaking of which, I still clearly remember the 3 clues that Wang Lu told me about Zhong Xingming, which are the most important clues in the search for the key. Therefore, I've always wondered why you guys didn't pay attention to it." Feng Yin curiously said, "How could we not pay attention to it?" Wang Lu even made a big heart demon oath in front of the entire excavation management to guarantee that his clues are absolutely correct. In the past 3 years, he has always been guided by those 3 clues and never ignored them. The 8th elder said with a smile, "That's even more wrong. Senior brother, do you remember what the 3rd clue is?" Feng Yin said, "Third, if you really can't find the clue in the known area, you might as well look further. 16,000 years is more than enough time for anything to happen. Yes, right now you can't find the clue in the known area, so why don't you look further?" Feng Yin wryly smiled. "How far can it be? 2 months ago I just came back from Penglai Island, and I even had a fight with the island master and snatched her water moon pearl for inspection. As a result, I was cursed by her for 2 months. The 8th elder curiously asked, "Is it the Penglai Island master who has a rumor with you?" Feng Nu angrily said, "Rumor my ass. It was Wang Wu, that bastard, who was talking nonsense. She even dared to ask me for hush money." Seeing that his senior brother was angry out of shame, the 8th elder quickly changed the topic. "That's why I said, senior brother, you guys are strange. You even ran away from the overseas immortal island, why don't you just run further?" Feng Yin snappily said, "How far? Do you want me to go to the Western continent?" Speaking to this, Feng Yin was suddenly startled. Then the 8th elder nodded and said, "Yes, if I were you, I would have already gone to the Western continent." Upon hearing this, Feng Yin suddenly felt enlightened. "Damn it, I'm really narrow-minded. I thought that the treasure of 9 regions can only be found in 9 regions, but I didn't think that after 10,000 years what can't happen. Not to mention that for thousands of years, the Eastern and Western continent have frequent exchanges. Isn't there a famous chef from the Western continent on the mountain?" Chapter 277. The key that the excavation management had been searching for 3 years was in the Western continent. Perhaps it was because there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world, or perhaps it was because the news of the Lingjian school frequently searching for information about the Western continent had spread like wildfire, or perhaps there were always people who were good at treasure hunting and the 8th elder of Heavenly Sword Hall who thought alike. In short, the news about the Western continent had recently become a hot topic in the immortal cultivation world of 9 regions. The Western continent referred to the West. After crossing the endless ocean to the west of the 9 regions, the land at the junction of the sea and sky was the Western continent. Needless to say, the first time the cultivators of 9 regions arrived in the Western continent was tens of thousands of years ago. At that time, the cultivators of 9 regions had just come out from the age of desolation. When they went to the western continent, they thought that they could find a paradise. However, what they saw was a desolate and barren land. The surrounding spiritual energy was thin, and there was no law of the great Tao of 9 regions. For cultivators, it was simply a dead end. Disappointed, they withdrew. In addition to leaving the name of the western continent, they didn't find anything else. After tens of thousands of years, a cargo ship that crossed the ocean arrived at the west coast of the 9 regions. The people of 9 regions were surprised to find that the western continent had unknowingly developed a vigorous civilization. With the increasingly close communication between the 2 continents, more and more western continent people entered 9 regions, and people gradually gained a bit more understanding of the former barren land. However, to this day the western continent was still a mysterious place for most of the people of 9 regions. In addition to knowing that there were different races and different civilizations, they still didn't know the specific situation. There were a lot of western continent people who entered 9 regions, but most of them were merchants and mercenaries. 9 regions people were even less willing to leave their homeland and go to the western continent. After all, although the western continent civilization was good, it was not as prosperous as the 9 regions. Thousands of years ago, there were several enthusiastic 9 regions cultivators, master and disciple, who went to the western continent and took the scriptures of the largest religion in the western continent back to 9 regions. Not only did they develop the religion of the western continent in 9 regions, they also brought the real seed of the western continent civilization. Their heroic story of going through countless hardships and dangers on their journey to the west to obtain Buddhist scriptures was compiled into a book by later scholars. It was named Journey to the West. Among the master and disciples, eldest Marshall brother was the most beloved. That cultivator's surnamed son was known for his fiery temperament and for being upright and outspoken. Unfortunately, the good times didn't last long. After they took the scriptures and practiced according to them, and finally established the sect, the eldest brother, who was the great elder of the sect, suffered from chi deviation and his primordial spirit was scattered. Later, although he was rescued by their master, his temperament changed greatly. From an upright and plain-spoken person he became brainless. All day long he said some sensational remarks such as after believing in the Lord, he knew that the civilization of 9 regions originally came from the western continent, and so on. His image plummeted, and the originally illustrious saint of war also became a silly saint. The sect that the master and the disciples painstakingly established also became unknown as time went by. A good opportunity for the exchange between the East and the West civilization died prematurely. In short, today's 9 regions people's understanding of the western continent was still limited. Their contact was limited to several countries that had a close business relationship with the 9 regions. However, the number of countries and city-states in the western continent far exceeded that of the 9 regions. Most of the regions were still mysterious. This time they speculated that the key to the group of immortal tombs might be in the western continent. Thus, before they went to the western continent, they naturally had to do their homework so that they could be prepared. For a time, books and records about the western continent became extremely popular in the 9 regions. The merchants who often traveled between the eastern and western continent also became very popular. This craze lasted for several months. Finally, the excavation management, in the name of the committee, integrated a team of more than 10 people and led a group of attendants and translators to the western continent to look for the key to the group of immortal tombs. At the same time, the big and small sects also received the news and organized their own expeditionary forces. After all, the key to the group of immortal tombs was of great importance, and the reward offered by the excavation management was particularly tempting. Even the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League each sent their own private army to get the key first and fight for a bigger voice in the excavation management. And in the Lingjian school, this private army mission fell on Wang Lu's head. Of course, it was more accurate to say that this mission was fought for by non-phase peak self-recommendation. At first, the sect leader Feng Yin didn't want Wang Lu to participate in the expedition to the western continent. First, these 3 years were the critical period for Wang Lu to consolidate his foundation and prepare for the King Pill. Second, the western continent was by no means a good place for cultivators. Because of the difference in the laws of the great Tao of heaven and earth, ordinary cultivators simply could not display much of their ability in the western continent. If their cultivation base was not stable enough, there was even the danger of their magical power collapsing. Only by advancing to the King Pill and condensing the great Tao of heaven and earth in the Jade Mansion could one maintain one's strength in a place with different laws. Whether it was the excavation management's expeditionary army or the private army of the other sects, All of them were king pill cultivators or above, and very few of them were Shudan stage cultivators. Of course, with the solid foundation of Wang Lu's cultivation base, even if he only had Shudan stage cultivation base, his Jade Mansion would not collapse after entering the Western continent. At most, his strength would be limited. However, when his cultivation base was advancing by leaps and bounds, suddenly changing his cultivation environment was definitely not a good thing. However, Wang Wu proposed that before Wang Lu's king pill was completed, he should have more experience, which would be helpful for his further cultivation. After all, she was Wang Lu's master, so she had the most authority on Wang Lu's cultivation. Feng Yin argued with her for a bit, but seeing that she seemed to be seriously proposing it instead of her usual loss of moral integrity, he no longer insisted and just let her be. Therefore, the important task of going to the Western continent, looking for the key to the group of immortal tombs, opening the Dixian treasure house, and enriching the small treasury of my non-phase peak will be handed over to you. The point is the last sentence, right? Rest assured, I already have a plan in mind, 90% sure. Wang Wu was particularly surprised. You're so confident? That's the mysterious Western continent. This time, sect leader senior brother will lead the team, supported by various sects and a gathering of heroes, but I don't dare to say that I have too much certainty. Where did your confidence come from? Wang Lu said with a smile, a gathering of heroes? I think it's just a motley crew. Uncle Feng Yin, as the chairman of the excavation management, has become muddled. Although there are many strong people in the team, they have no tacit understanding with each other, instead they have a lot of hatred toward each other. When they arrive at the Western continent, that unfamiliar place, if they don't kill each other, it's already good enough. It's not realistic to expect them to cooperate with each other sincerely. Hehe, I heard that even Supreme Tianyu has been added to the team, which really makes people doubt whether Uncle Sect Leader has the sincerity to look for the key. In this regard, his master smiled but said nothing. What about you? You're just a Shudan stage cultivator, can you do better than them? Even if they only have a bit of skill, they're still far better than you. Tisk, so what if I'm a Shudan stage cultivator? As a master, aren't you also in the King Pill stage? Moreover, there are two of them, plus your precious emerald green bamboo sword, you're a real man. Hey, I'm the #1 King Pill in 9 regions, you better respect me a bit. In short, we're going to look for things, not to fight. Is it important to have a high or low cultivation base? We should use our brains to find things, not our fists. I don't think sect leader Marshall Uncle's brain is very clear. He didn't take a good shortcut, but instead chose to find a bunch of mobs as his teammates and a bunch of ignorant people as his followers. So, you have a shortcut? Of course, I'll wait for the good news. After ending the conversation with his master, Wang Lu went straight to the Misty Peak cafeteria. When it came to a shortcut, wasn't it obvious that there was one? The biggest problem with this trip to the west was that they were unfamiliar with the people and the place. Therefore, the role of a translator and guide was actually more important than those Taoist masters and supreme with brute force. And when it came to a guide, there was a ready-made guide here. Through these years of daily contact, Wang Lu was very clear that the Western continent chef was by no means an ordinary person. Her speech and behavior all reflected the characteristics of the people in the Western continent. Occasionally, when they talked in depth, it showed that she was knowledgeable. Such a person must be a descendant of the emperor in the Western continent, which was far better than the so-called professional guide hired by the excavation management from the west coast of 9 regions. Those guides had lived in the eastern part of the Western continent for a period of time. Most of them were civilians, barely qualified to lead a tour. Wanting to find a treasure that had been lost for thousands of years in the Western continent was simply whimsical. Entering the cafeteria, Wang Lu didn't hurry to open his mouth. He just ordered a few side dishes, which made the chef beaming with joy, and then went to the main topic. Aya, have you ever heard of a treasure that can create the world in your Western continent? Aya blinked her pair of green eyes and said with a smile, of course, there are a lot of them. As far as I know, there are more than 1,000 kinds of legends about the creation of the world in the Western continent. Among them, there are nearly 100 that are supported by real objects. Wang Lu said, it has to be a bit more reliable, the kind that can really split open the world. According to the standard here, it has to be an immortal treasure. I was surprised. The requirement is so high? Creation of the world, and it's also an immortal treasure. Then there's only one. As far as I know, only the Golden King's Sword of Creation is a genuine creation of the world. You want to find it? Yes, in fact, if possible, I hope you can go with me. Aya was quite surprised by Wang Lu's invitation. You want me to go with you? I'm afraid not. Wang Lu said with a smile, Don't worry, this is a public travel, the budget is unlimited and you will be satisfied. As soon as his voice fell, Aya's face turned serious. I'm sorry, that's even worse. Question mark. Wang Lu curiously looked at Aya. Aya sternly said, I oppose the private use of public funds. Facing Aya's infinite righteous look, Wang Lu froze for a quarter of an hour, not knowing what to say. You said you oppose public funds. Aya nodded and said, from a small family to a big country, everything should be done in accordance with the rules. As for public expenditure, every cent should be carefully and cautiously, and must not be arbitrarily misappropriated and squandered. This is my code of conduct. Wang Lu asked, these words sound so righteous. All these years, hasn't your Misty Peak cafeteria ever hosted public banquets? Aya's tone was even more indifferent. Never, so there's no need to talk about it anymore. The cafeteria is closed, please come back another day. At the end of her words, her voice was cold as if she wanted him to leave. After rolling out of the Misty Peak cafeteria, Wang Lu secretly scolded himself for being muddle-headed. With Aya's cooking skills, which elder would eat and drink at the Misty Peak cafeteria with public funds? Even if the public funds were public, one could not cherish them, but their stomach was their own, right? Alas, no wonder Aya was angry, but in the end, this is really a chef who has broken away from vulgar taste. However, the more it is like this, the more I like you. Gee, as a qualified chef, how can you miss the responsibility of saving the world? Chapter 278. Chef, I see that you have a big head and thick neck, you are the best candidate for the treasure hunt in the West. I will give you this VIP meal ticket, and the important task of escorting me to the Western continent to find the key will fall on you. Get lost. To be able to make the always modest and courteous Misty Peak chef say such straightforward words, it could be considered as a kind of ability. In the past 2 days, among the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect who occasionally passed by the Misty Peak, the most common thing they saw was Wang Lu walking into the cafeteria with a face full of interest, but a moment later, he returned in frustration. In the past few days he had become a laughing stock. Wang Lu's reputation in Spirit Sword sect was quite resounding. In less than 13 years he had already reached middle-level Shudan stage, and his actual combat ability was on the level of King Pill, far above his peers. Even many seniors who had been cultivating for 20 or 30 years could only stare blankly at him. What was even more surprising was his ability to deal with practical matters. Since his debut he went down the mountain to establish the Wisdom sect, contended against the 10,000 Art sect's exchange team, overthrew the Beast Master School division of the Grand Cloud Mountain, developed the ancient sword tomb. Any one of these was enough to make him famous. Now, not to mention Spirit Sword sect, even in the entire immortal cultivation world of 9 regions, Wang Lu was a well-known figure. However, this seemingly omnipotent well-known figure had been repeatedly defeated in the Misty Peak cafeteria, which immediately aroused people's great curiosity. Unfortunately, every time Wang Lu and Aya talked, it was a secret. Although people were curious, they could only let their imagination run wild. For example, Wang Lu and Aya had actually been having an affair for a long time. As early as 10 years ago, Wang Lu fell in love with Aya at first sight. After several years of continuous pursuit, he finally moved her heart. Otherwise, there was no way to explain why he often came to the Misty Peak cafeteria to eat, but now, because of emotional discord, they broke up. Several times they negotiated about abortion, breakup fee and other issues, but to no avail. Wang Lu, who was born a poor loser, tried to bribe her with a meal ticket, which aroused Aya's great anger. Thus, the matter fell into an impasse. Such vulgar rumors gradually spread in Spirit Sword sect. Although Wang Lu's reputation was not bad, after a long time, many people still doubted it. It was not that they didn't believe in Wang Lu's character, but it was said that the original source of such rumors came from Non-Phase Peak. This undoubtedly increased the weight of the rumor. As for Wang Lu, he had been annoyed by Aya for the past few days, so he was too lazy to care about the bad behavior of a bored person who took the opportunity to slander him. If Aya's problem was not solved, he really had no interest in considering other things. During this period he had used various methods to probe her. Aya really seemed to have no intention of going west. Let alone going west, she didn't even want to leave Spirit Sword Mountain. But this was strange. From Wang Lu's point of view, Aya was completely different from the lady boss. She was not the kind of nerd who shut herself in. Although she lived a quiet and comfortable life in the Misty Peaks cafeteria, when they occasionally chatted, it was hard to conceal the rare heroism of a woman. If such a person were to be placed outside, he would at least be a hero. How could he be at ease as a chef in the cafeteria, The key point was that he was not even a professional chef. Aya, what's your problem? Why don't you tell me? We've been fair-weather friends for so many years, how could I not help you? In this regard, Aya just smiled indifferently. I appreciate your kindness, but if there's really a problem before you go up the mountain, wouldn't I ask the other elders to help me? Let's not talk about this anymore. Wang Lu was also at his wit's end, so he had no choice but to say, could it be that your body has been taken by that old fart sect leader? Rest assured, I'll put celery juice in his tea to avenge you. Get lost. He didn't know how many times he had gotten lost. Fortunately, each time he could still enter the Misty Peaks cafeteria the next day when it was open as usual. However, the problem could not be solved, which inevitably made him depressed. After thinking about it, Wang Lu had no choice but to use his killer move. Master, what's going on with Aya? The so-called killer move was naturally to ask for help from an insider. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy and you will win every battle. Aya had her reasons for being so attached to the Misty Peaks cafeteria. When the reason was unclear, Wang Lu couldn't easily use many means. After all, Aya and him could be regarded as half teacher and half friend, and his non-phase sword art had a bit of shadow of Aya's swordsmanship. Therefore, when the situation was unclear, it was inevitable that his hands and feet would be tied. To find out the situation, the first choice was, of course, to ask the person herself. Unfortunately, Wang Lu tried several times, but Aya did not respond. As for the other elders, after all, they were not as familiar with each other as his master. Tisuke, you finally know how to ask people, not trying to be brave anymore? His master had been waiting for him at the non-phase peak for a long time. Aya's problem is actually very simple. It's not that she doesn't want to go, but she can't go. Can't go? Wang Lu was taken aback and directly jumped up from his chair. Sure enough, that old fart sect leader took her body and then used her son as a hostage? Wang Wu gawked for a moment and then clapped her hands in praise. Good idea. Tomorrow I'll spread this rumor. If that old fart doesn't give me a raise, I won't clarify it. Master, if you don't court death, you won't die. Why don't you understand? However, seeing his master's response, Wang Lu also knew that his guess was probably 10,000 miles off. What the hell is going on? It's a long story, but where should I start? Wang Wu knocked the table with her knuckles, pondered for a moment, and then asked, You and Aya have known each other for more than 10 years, so you should have a certain understanding of her. In your opinion, what is her character? Wang Lu thought for a moment. Generally speaking, she is an upright, serious, humble, and polite person with a strong sense of responsibility. It can be seen that she is a bit competitive, but for some reason she has restrained herself a lot. In addition, although there is no overbearingness in her speech, she is indifferent and familiar with many people and things, which is clearly the reaction of a person in a high position. It gives people the feeling that she is a noble lord or the ruler of a country. It's really hard to imagine why she is a part-time chef here. Well, the speculation is basically correct. She is indeed a king. Of course, now she can only be regarded as the ruler of a subjugated country. Wang Lu was surprised. Is it because she cooks for her people? Wang Wu looked at her disciple coldly. You can try to say the same to her. I still understand the principle of not courting death, you will not die. Please continue. There are too many reasons why her country was torn apart and destroyed by the hands of others, but her own personality also played a large part. You should have expected this, so I won't go into details. Wang Lu nodded. It was very clear that with Aya's particularly serious personality, she was actually not suitable to be the leader, especially the leader of a country. It was not unusual whether it was the Qing country or the kingdom. However, because of her personality, she was not reconciled after the fall of her country. She wholeheartedly blamed the suffering of all living beings on herself, and felt remorseful. There are many stories behind this, but in short, when she was at a loss, she heard a rumor. In the distant eastern continent, there is a magical way to win a war. The way to win a war? Wang Lu frowned and said, Is it a cheat? If you interrupt again, I won't tell you. Listen, you and I are both from 9 regions, so naturally, we are dismissive of the way to win a war. But for Aya at that time, it was the only hope in the darkness. Therefore, she went through untold hardships to come to the east, just to find the way to win a war. During this period, she met a senior brother of the Heavenly Sword Hall, and by chance coincidence, she was left on the mountain. Wait a minute, there is too much missing information. Her confused mind was not clear. It's fine if she was looking for a groundless cheat, but what about when she met a Heavenly Sword Hall elder and was left on the mountain? Could it be that the elder deceived her, saying that as long as she was a chef for 100 years, He would reward her with the way to win a war, and then slowly enlighten her to put down the burden and move on to a new life? Although she is straightforward, she is not an idiot. Speaking to this, Wang Wu's expression slightly dimmed. How could it be that simple? When the senior brothers met her, she was already at the end of her rope, and what supported her was her obsession. She has been wandering in 9 regions for many years, so how could she not know that the so-called way to win a war is completely false? However, once this obsession disappears, the whole person will also die. When the senior brothers saw her, they sighed with emotion at her life's experience, so they brought her back to the mountain and used the power of Spirit Sword Mountain to help her condense her soul and maintain her vitality. But this is just a temporary solution. Once she leaves Spirit Sword Mountain, she will immediately disappear. Wang Lu was surprised. What is this thing? It can actually change according to the will of the mind, and once she leaves the mountain she will disappear? Wang Wu coldly said, what else could it be? It's the undead. Undead? Although from a rational point of view, according to the previous clues and reasoning, this answer was simply logical. However, thinking of Aya's usual smile and voice, wait a minute, this word was somewhat wrong. But in short, it was really hard for Wang Lu to imagine that the heroic girl was actually a dead person. Of course it's not an ordinary wandering ghost. Have you ever seen an undead that is the same as a real person? It has a heartbeat, body temperature, shadow, clear thinking. She is a spirit of the brave departed. Wang Wu sighed. When she was alive, she had outstanding meritorious service and was revered and worshipped by thousands of people. She was upright and outspoken, has a bright and upright temperament, and also has obsession. After death, she may become a spirit of the brave departed. Of course, ordinary spirits of the brave departed are not as good as her. Her soul must be pure and untainted, and the will of the people is extremely strong. At the same time, her primordial spirit must be extremely powerful. Coupled with extremely special conditions, only then can she condense into such a vivid spirit of the brave departed. Wang Lu nodded. When a cultivator reaches the unity stage, the 3 aspects of essence, qi and soul are combined, and the primordial spirit and the body are mutually transformed. In other words, when Aya was alive, she was a unity stage expert? Speaking to this, Wang Lu was in awe. When she was alive, she was in the Western continent, so the laws there are different, so it can't be so simple. But in general it should not be much different. Wang Wu said, but when she was alive, she witnessed the destruction of her country and the devastation of her people. Under the shock of her primordial spirit, she was actually unable to transform into a spirit of the brave departed. It was because she met a special condition that she could be resurrected. Simply put, it's similar to the big heart demon oath. She vowed to complete one thing, and before that, her soul will not fly away and scatter. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu has sorted out the ins and outs of the matter. That is, to find the way to win the war and to recover the motherland. It's just that, when she was traveling in the 9 regions, she gradually felt that the way to win the war was elusive. Thus, she relaxed her big heart demon oath, and it was difficult to condense the body of the brave departed. Then she met the sect elder, who used the power of the feng shui line and a special spell to stabilize her body. But she can't leave the mountain, right? Wang Wu said. In addition, the elder did her a big favor. Out of gratitude she stayed on the mountain. Big favor? Full of sympathy and pity, Wang Wu said, actually, I just invited her to eat a big meal and she was so moved. She came to the 9 regions alone with the body of the brave departed. For many years she didn't even have a full meal. That was the first time she tasted the food of the 9 regions. She was so surprised that her soul almost flew out of her body. Later, she thought that she had received a great favor, so she decided to at least repay the favor before she died. She had a clear distinction between gratitude and grudges. Unfortunately, there wasn't much she could do on the mountain. Instead, her appetite was unbearable, so she ate a lot of food stored in the Spirit Sword Mountain. Later, she felt ashamed, so she volunteered to take over the position of the head chef of the Misty Peak. She said that no matter what, she couldn't accept the favor of others for no reason. At the same time, such delicious food must be cooked by her own hands to be more valuable. As a result, as you can see with her special physique, she probably can't repay the favor in this life. In short, that's about Aya's story. If you can get a clue from it and liberate her, it can be considered as a boundless merit. Speaking to this, Wang Wu said with a rather playful smile, how about it, do you have the confidence to do it? Wang Lu snorted. After hearing such a story, how could I have any other answer? In the autumn of the 6,356th year of the 9 regions, Wang Lu silently made a vow on the non-phase peak, determined to carry out a great plan. To save the head chef Aya. Chapter 279. Sister Aya, don't be afraid, a professional adventurer is here to save you. After hearing Aya's story from his master, Wang Lu made up his mind. Of course, determination alone was useless. Aya's experience was not a secret among the high-level members of Spirit Sword Mountain. The elders who were the same generation as Wang Wu basically knew the inside story, and many people sympathized with her. However, no one could really solve this problem. Among them there was the matchless sect leader Feng Yin, as well as Wang Lu's master, Wang Wu, who was superior to her disciple in all aspects. Although his master didn't say it clearly, according to Wang Lu's understanding, if she really had a way, she would not just stand by and watch. Even if she offered a sky-high price to blackmail him, she would not be completely indifferent. And since his master didn't make her move, it meant that she felt powerless. Similarly, the sect leader and the other elders didn't need to be said. So many capable people couldn't solve it, so how could Wang Lu solve it? In theory, this was an almost unsolvable problem. Aya's problem was at the level of the brave departed, which was at least equivalent to a deity stage problem. With Wang Lu's mere Shudan stage cultivation, the difference was simply like heaven and earth. There was no room for technical maneuver. However, this matter was not completely hopeless. Although it was somewhat whimsical, after listening to Aya's life experience, a light of inspiration flashed in Wang Lu's mind. Although it was weak, it illuminated the darkness. Wang Lu was not an arrogant person who was blindly confident. Aspiration was aspiration, inspiration was inspiration, but when it came to actual operation he had to be careful. Aya's situation was, after all, extraordinary. Right now, it could be said that her life was pinned on this mountain, in a delicate state of balance. If Wang Lu acted recklessly and casually took Aya down the mountain, once her soul flew away and scattered, 100 deaths would not be enough to redeem her. Therefore, before starting, Wang Lu carefully analyzed the known conditions, and then carefully deduced it in his bedroom. He didn't go out for 3 days. 3 days later, Wang Lu burned a large pile of papers and pushed the door with a smile on his face. He already had a well-thought-out plan. Aya, I'm here again. With a casual greeting, Wang Lu once again pushed open the door of Ethereal Peak's cafeteria. Seeing the sincere smile on Wang Lu's face, even Aya, who was used to seeing storms, felt somewhat powerless. You are here again? Aya had rather complicated feelings towards this young man whose speech and actions were often unexpected. On one hand, she was annoyed by Wang Lu's persistent pestering, but after getting along with him for more than 10 years, how could she not see that Wang Lu actually had the heart to help her? Although the method was hard to accept, but he would probably give up after a few days. At that time, she would be able to regain her peace. Humph, this time I came with the belief that I will definitely win. Hearing this, Aya could not help but have a headache. Absolute confidence in victory? I'm afraid it's the integrity that will definitely fall. Wang Lu, this brat, is indeed not bad in nature, but he has too many crooked ideas. It's simply overwhelming. The previous few pestering already made me physically and mentally exhausted. What is this so-called absolute confidence in victory? For a moment, Aya even felt as if she had returned to a long time ago, on that desolate sword mound, facing the scene of being abandoned by her friends and family. She was also as powerless as she was now. However, after a moment, Aya was surprised to find that this time, Wang Lu was different. His expression was no longer frivolous but incomparably serious. Aya, this time I came with the belief that I will definitely win. The same words, but the emphasis in his tone was on the word definitely win. Aya was surprised when she heard this. You know yourself and know your enemy and you will never be defeated. Of course, I know what I should know. Aya was somewhat surprised. After all, although her body of the brave spirit was not taboo, it was not something that could be easily publicized. But, if it was Wang Lu, since you know it, then please go back. Wang Lu repeated again, I came with the belief that I will definitely win. You. Aya finally understood what Wang Lu wanted to say, so she remained silent and waited for him to continue. Because Wang Lu didn't seem to be joking. Moreover, if he made a joke about this, Aya would be very disappointed with him. I have a way to win every war. Aya unconsciously exhaled, not knowing whether to laugh or not. She had been in 9 regions for many years and almost everyone said the opposite. There was no way to win every war in the world. Few people like Wang Lu dared to claim that they had it. Of course, she had heard similar words several times, and all of them were swindlers with ulterior motives. Aya didn't think that Wang Lu wanted to scheme against her. After all, she was no longer the king who had thousands of troops under her command. And with the current situation of Wang Lu, there was nothing to scheme against her. Did he say that to give her a little comfort? Haha, unfortunately she didn't like other people's sympathy or pity, because it was completely unnecessary. No, I'm not playing the game of a caring sister. I really have a way to win every war. Wang Lu repeated his point of view again, and then looked at Aya with a smile. Aya's expression became more and more serious. Before you open your mouth to question, let me ask you a question first. In your opinion, if there is a way to win every war, what would it be? Upon hearing this, Aya was startled. After thinking for a moment, she said, "At first I thought it would be a book that recorded the supreme and mysterious art of war, as well as other magical spells of the East. At that time I heard that the Easterners were very good at war. In my country, the big battle that involved the fate of the country in the East was perhaps just a battle between mountain strongholds. However, in reality I found that it was too exaggerated. The art of war in 9 regions does have its own uniqueness, but to say that the war must be won." Wang Lu said with a smile, "Yes, how could there be a way to win every war recorded in a book? If a book is seen by both sides, wouldn't that be a paradox?" Aya nodded. "Yes, I have witnessed many wars in 9 regions, some between the people of 9 regions and some between 9 regions and the people of Western continent. Some are wonderful, some are stupid, but no matter how I look at it, it's far from the way to win every war. It was also from that time that I had doubts in my heart." With that, she also took the initiative to ask Wang Lu, "You see, if there really is a way to win every war, what would happen to 9 regions? I have also thought that if there is such a method, there should be an incomparably powerful empire in the 9 regions. The emperor would be good at war and conquer all sides. I have seen several such countries in 9 regions, but, obviously they don't have a way to win every war." "Of course they don't. Do they deserve it? The way to win every war is very rare even in 9 regions, how could it be casually spread in the mortal world? Aya, from the beginning you have the wrong idea, so of course you can't find it. The way to win the war is neither a book nor an oral formula, nor is it an ordinary landscape that can be seen in the 9 regions. So, in your opinion, what is the way to win every war?" Wang Lu said, "It's very simple. First, there must be an invincible person, and then there is a way to win every war. In other words, the so-called way to win every war is the summary of the life of an invincible person." Aya was stunned for a moment. "You're reversing the cause and effect, and it doesn't make any sense." "No, this is the only correct way to say it. Any theory must be tested by practice. Therefore, if there is no invincible person, then all the methods to win every war must be false. This is not difficult to understand, right? In fact, when you look for an invincible country, it's also based on this logic, isn't it? So what? If you agree with this, then we can move on to the next question. If you want to find the way to win every war, then you just need to find an invincible person, and I happen to be invincible." The amount of information in Wang Lu's words was a bit too much. Aya froze for a moment and then laughed in spite of herself. "You're invincible? But where did this come from? Small fights don't count, the scale can be called war level. Tell me, when did I lose? As long as I seriously want to fight for it, when have I not been able to get it? Moreover, when did I not go through hardships in my adventure? If you were in my shoes, could you do better than me?" Aya was stunned and speechless. Her life was also magnificent, and the storms she experienced were by no means comparable to Wang Lu, a young man who had just debuted for more than 10 years. However, if she were to say that she could do better than Wang Lu, she might not be able to. However, if she were to say that Wang Lu was invincible. For example, even if I challenge you right now, you don't have much chance of winning. Wang Lu smiled. First, what you are looking for is a sure-win method in the war, not a sure-win method in a small fight. Second, will you challenge me? The kind of life-and-death fight? Aya smiled. Indeed, I won't, but, in short, your reputation of being invincible doesn't seem to live up to it. Wang Lu said, to be invincible, there must be a battle to determine victory and defeat. It is the basic skill of a wise man to not fight a battle that he is not confident of winning. If it were you, with only 3 to 5 personal guards, would you directly attack the enemy's army? I would, and I often win. Aya smiled. I know what you mean. Thank you for saying this. But Wang Lu didn't want to hear it. Don't be in a hurry to come to a conclusion. I know that empty words can't win people's trust. But regardless of whether it is true or not, it must be tested before a conclusion can be made. Whether I have a way to win a war or not, I don't have the right to say it, and neither do you. Only the truth counts. So, I ask you to witness it with your own eyes. Witness it with my own eyes? Yes, I ask you to witness whether I am invincible or not. I wanted to say, I can't even leave the mountain right now, so how can I witness whether you are invincible or not? Moreover, whether you are invincible or not, what does it have to do with me? Seeing this, Wang Lu silently stood up. He looked up to the sky and said in a deep voice, I, Wang Lu, hereby swear that I will bravely move forward in this life and win every war I experience. He paused for a moment. Then I will restore Aya's country. As long as the country is not restored, there will be no King Pill. You. Aya was shocked. She also stood up, her green eyes reflecting a look of disbelief. Wang Lu calmly smiled and said, So, can you follow me down the mountain to restore your country? Chapter 280. Congratulations on successfully poaching a gold guide. Nowadays, although there are many Western continent people in 9 regions, and there is no lack of influential people, I'm afraid it's not easy to find a guide better than Aya. Before she ascended the throne, she was already a learned nobleman. The queen has a broad vision and extensive knowledge. Moreover, because of her nature, she has an unusual interest in rare treasures. She is well known in treasure hunting, collection, and other aspects. Although she has been away from the Western continent for nearly 100 years, you don't need someone to help you find a fashion holy land, but a legendary immortal treasure. Thus, there is no more suitable guide than Aya. On the non-phase peak, Wang Wu patted her disciple's shoulder with emotion. It was really not easy to persuade Aya. In fact, she had also thought of the method that Wang Lu thought of many years ago, but unfortunately she didn't have the capital to put it into practice. Although Aya had a paranoid side, she was by no means a stupid person. Trying to fool her with a set of sensational theory would only make her unhappy. The crux of Aya's problem was the way to win every war, so the quickest way to cut the tangled knot was to find a set of way to win every war. Wang Wu also thought of this in the past, but unfortunately she couldn't be like Wang Lu, who fiercely patted her chest and vowed that she would win every war, and that her life trajectory was the way to win every war. Although at that time she had already mastered the King Pill and had the title of the #1 King Pill in 9 regions. However, this cultivation came precisely from the crushing defeat in her early years. To say that she was invincible, she was not qualified. Similarly, the other elders on the non-phase peak were also the same. Only Wang Lu, the chosen one who won every war with irresistible force, was qualified to boast such words, and was qualified to bear the trust of Aya. Hey, it's still far from it. Wang Lu picked up the teacup, which was only a shallow layer of tea. He shook the teacup in front of Aya's eyes and said, Aya's trust in me is at most the level of this cup of tea. After all, she is an experienced and knowledgeable king, so it is impossible to convince her in one go. I can only do it step by step. But at least she agreed to go down the mountain with you. Yes, I can barely survive without the support of the earth veins, but it's only at the lowest level. Most of the time, she couldn't even maintain her physical body. I needed to prove myself through more victories in order to gradually restore her strength as a heroic spirit. However, this is not something that can be done in just 3 or 5 days, so for a very long time, she will probably only be able to exist as an old granny that you carry around with you. Speaking of this, I heard that in order to persuade her to come down the mountain, you swore not to take the King Pill until you restore your country? Wang Lu said, It's nothing, right? Originally, he planned to postpone the King Pill for a few years, so he could use this opportunity to increase Aya's favorability. That guy usually looks easy to talk to, but his heart is still very closed, so it's very difficult to get a favorable impression. Moreover, in this trip to the Western continent, it's inevitable that we have to deal with the local forces. If we can have the king as our backer, it would be more convenient. It's easy to say. Her country has been destroyed for 100 years. It's easier said than done to revive it. That depends on the standard of restoring the country. I have some confidence in this. In fact, in my opinion, Aya is the type that is easy to persuade. She is stubborn and has a strong sense of morality, which is very easy to do. The smile on his master's face became a bit thicker. Even the most difficult problem, it seems like you have a solution. Then I only have one question. Go ahead. Regarding his master's continuous questions, Wang Lu was very patient. After all, in order to persuade Aya this time, the background information provided by his master was crucial. When can I drink your wedding wine? Puff. Wang Wu calmly used her primordial spirit to control the sword light to block the incoming tea. Seriously, you've been drinking that tea for so long, don't you think it's disgusting to suddenly spit it out? You're disgusting. Drink your sister's wedding wine. Wang Wu said with a smile, haven't you thought about it? Although Aya's seniority is a bit higher, she's a bit short, her figure is a bit poor, and her craftsmanship is a bit poor, but it's undeniable that she's a rare beauty. Moreover, she has extensive knowledge, noble background, and powerful strength. The most important thing is that she has the body of the brave departed, so you don't have to worry about pregnancy. What else can you ask for? I will remember to convey these words to Aya. When she's protected by the feng shui line on the mountain, she can only exert strength close to unity stage. I wish you good luck, master. Humph, if worst comes to worst, I'll just wander around. Why would I be afraid of you? But seriously, you're not that young anymore. You're already in your 20s, so you should think about life's major event. Wang Wu said, took a sip of the tea and then lightly said, you can't really be single for a lifetime, right? I see that although there are many beautiful women around you, the one that's really compatible with you is probably only Aya. Lu Li is like a younger sister by Shen is raised as a daughter by you, not to mention Zhu Shiyao. Wang Lu shook his head. Don't say that. Aya and I don't have a common view, so there's no future for the two of us. After thinking for a moment, he said, at most, I'll be your mistress. Wang Wu gawked for a moment, and then she couldn't help but laugh. You really don't want to die? What? Wang Lu frowned, and then his intuition told him that something was wrong. When he turned around, he saw Aya, dressed in white, holding a lunchbox, lightly standing behind him. Her indifferent face carried a touch of sullen anger. Then a faint voice came from those two light pink lips. Mistress? Wang Lu thought for a moment, and in an instant, thousands of perfunctory reasons emerged in his mind. However, when he saw Aya's pair of clear eyes, all the hypocritical lies couldn't come out of his mouth. That being the case, he might as well tell the truth. Don't you want to do it, girl? The next moment, a lunchbox filled with all kinds of dishes came toward his head. It was already a month later when Wang Lu and the team left Spirit Sword Mountain. The composition of the team was not complicated. Wang Lu was the captain, Aya was the guide, and Lu Li, Bai Shen, and Quan Zhuhua were the team members. Initially, they also considered big sister Zhu Shiyao, but unfortunately, she has been named by her master Feng Yin to join the excavation management's team and went to the west as a follower. As for other people like Yu Xinyao and Wen Bao, although their cultivation base had made great progress in the past few years, because of the law of the two continents, cultivators below the level of King Pill would be greatly suppressed. Only Wang Lu and other successor disciples had the courage to go against the suppression of the continent's law in the Western continent. Over the past month, the team spent most of their time preparing various kinds of materials. Under the guidance of Aya, they collected a lot of rare treasures of the 9 regions, trying to be as prepared as possible. At the same time, they also made a full plan for their trip to the Western continent. If you want to find immortal treasures, the first stop should be the Golden King's treasure house. According to legend, all the treasures in the world were collected there, but later on they were constantly lost. Many of the legendary treasures actually came from the Golden King's collection. Of course, now it seems that this is just an exaggeration of later generations. After all, in 9 regions alone, there are many immortal treasures that are not later than Golden King. However, the Golden King's treasure house has always had a peculiar property, that is, it gathers all the ownerless treasures in the world. Any treasure, once it is out of the protection of its master, may be summoned by the Golden King's treasure house and appear there. Hey, isn't that very powerful? But Golden King has been dead for a long time, so the treasure house itself is ownerless. Therefore, many people will go to the treasure house to dig the inexhaustible treasure. In my lifetime, the place where the treasure house is located has been called Taba. Oh, by the way, according to the Gregorian calendar of the Western continent, on the 11th of November every year, the Golden King's treasure house will be more open, and the chance of finding the treasure will increase a lot. I believe there will only be more people who will go bankrupt there. Of course, although the treasure house is ownerless, there are still guardians. At the same time, all the people who die in the treasure house will become the guardians of the treasure house. Therefore, on the 11th of November every year, when a large number of treasures are excavated, there will also be a large number of adventurers who will stay in the treasure house forever. Speaking of which, it is somewhat similar to the group of immortal tombs that you are currently preparing to excavate. It can be seen that no matter what, there will always be some boring people. So, do you think the key to the group of immortal tombs is likely to be hidden in the Golden King's treasure house? Yes, because as far as I know, the treasure that best fits your description is the Sword of Golden King. That sword has never appeared in the Western continent, so it's likely to be hidden in the depths of the treasure house. At the same time, even if it's not the Sword of Golden King, because the time doesn't match, Since it's not known to me, the biggest possibility is that it's in the treasure house. Very logical reasoning. Then let's go directly to Taba. At this moment, the advantage of bringing Aya with them was undoubtedly evident. As the king of a country in the Western continent, the information that she grasped was far better than that of ordinary people. For example, the treasure house of Golden King was indeed known by many people in the Western continent. However, the principal of the treasure house was rarely known, let alone the sword of Golden King. As a matter of fact, the team assembled by the excavation management did not take the treasure house of Golden King as their primary goal. Because, in their view, the so-called treasure house of Golden King was just a heritage that had been excavated for many years, so it didn't have too much value of attention. The first stop of the excavation management's team was the knowledge capital of the country of dragons in the Western continent. They hoped to find clues in the Library of Endless Mystery, which was said to contain 80% of the knowledge in the continent, and then carry out a targeted search. The knowledge capital is indeed a good choice, but too much knowledge will only increase the difficulty of distinguishing and filtering. If we want to find the needed information there, I'm afraid it will take a long time. Of course, if we don't get the desired result in our first stop, then we still have to go to the knowledge capital. Rest assured, I have a hunch that things will not be that troublesome. The first stop will certainly have what we want. No, it's even more than expected. Chapter 281. Oh, it's more prosperous than the last time I came here. It's simply earth-shaking. On a spacious road, Aya, who was wearing a gray cloak, was surprised to see the tall buildings and endless traffic on both sides. Now, together with Wang Lu and the others, she had arrived at the westernmost part of the 9 regions, a city called Heaven's Road. As far as the eye could see, it was a bustling scene. This is one of the trade hubs between the East and West continents. Moreover, it's a newly built port city, so naturally, it's changing with each passing day. When you came here, it was just built 100 years ago. It's not much better than a small fishing village, but now it's a big city with a population of tens of thousands. In addition to the prosperity, what was even more impressive was the mixed and open culture of this place. With the development of trade, the communication between the East and West continents became integrated, and the birth of all kinds of cultural crystallization was even more eye-catching. Unfortunately, the group didn't have much time to stay here and enjoy the scenery. Wang Lu's schedule was very tight. When they arrived at Heaven's Road City, it happened to be the day when the mysterious Sky Mansion's merchant fleet was about to set sail to the Western continent. Today, about half of the trade between the East and West continents was controlled by the mysterious Sky Mansion and its various chambers of commerce. After all, only a behemoth like the mysterious Sky Mansion had enough resources and manpower to organize cross-continent trade. The endless sea's deadly fog, as well as the endless sea monsters and demons, were not something that an ordinary chamber of commerce could deal with. Through the many years of cooperation between the Wisdom Sect and the mysterious Sky Mansion, Wang Lu successfully contacted the mysterious Sky Mansion's branch in Heaven's Road City. He made an appointment with the branch's fleet to set sail together with the merchant fleet to the Western continent. This kind of fleet only sailed 2 or 3 times a year. If they missed this opportunity, they would have to wait for a few months. In addition to the mysterious Sky Mansion's fleet, although there were many other cargo ships, safety and other issues were difficult to guarantee. Through the contact information sent by the mysterious Sky Mansion, Wang Lu and the others found the captain of the fleet at the dock and were ready to set sail. However, as every seasoned adventurer was familiar with the law, in any adventure most of the time was used to deal with unexpected situations. Wang Lu and the others just happened to encounter an unexpected situation. In short, you want to raise the price? The original agreement of 1,000 spirit stones is not enough for you? On the dock, facing the warm and humid sea breeze, Wang Lu smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in his smile. Standing in front of Wang Lu was a burly middle-aged man with dark red skin and luxuriously dressed clothes. He was the person in charge of the fleet, Nie Yang. As the vice president of the mysterious Sky Mansion Sky Road City branch, Nie Yang had a very high status in Sky Road City. At the same time, he also had a good cultivation on the immortal Tao. Normal cultivators would treat him with respect when they saw him, but when Wang Lu looked at him with a cold gaze, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat and panic in his heart. Perhaps it's not wrong to say that they're trying to raise the price. In the end, Nie Yang was used to big storms and waves, so he calmed his mind and explained, "But we really have no choice. Recently, the endless sea suddenly changed and the risk has doubled. In order to deal with the risk, the fleet has made a lot of arrangements, and the cost of sailing has increased exponentially. The original agreement of 1,000 spirit stones is really not enough, so we had to put down our pride and raise the price. In fact, the price of 3,000 spirit stones is not enough to cover the cost. Wang Lu had no intention to calculate the cost with the other side. Instead, he sneered and said, "If there is no risk in the trade between the East and West continents, why would it be your turn to do it? You are businessmen, so you should understand the spirit of the contract." Nie Yang said, "The contract also stipulates that if force majeure occurs, we have the right to adjust the price." "Yes, and the definition of force majeure is also up to you to interpret." Nie Yang said, "Please believe that we absolutely do not intend to blackmail you, but we really have no choice. This kind of thing is also detrimental to the reputation of our mysterious sky mansion. If not for the fleet that set off from West Tomb Port some time ago, stirring up monstrous waves on the endless sea, we would not have to do this. In fact, there are not many fleets that are willing to go to the sea now." Seeing that Nie Yang refused to budge no matter what, insisting on tripling the already high fare, Wang Lu deeply frowned. Of course, he didn't care about a few thousand spirit stones. Perhaps it was a huge amount of money for ordinary cultivators, but his net worth was incalculable. Thousands of spirit stones were just like pocket money to him. But he really didn't like people raising the price. However, Nie Yang's temporary price increase was also reasonable in the contract. If it's difficult, it's better not to follow his fleet. In the silence, standing behind Wang Lu, a girl in a gray robe softly said. Wang Lu shook his head. The endless sea is vast and boundless, and the changes are endless. It's not unusual to encounter any situation on the sea. Without a skilled fleet to guide us, it's really difficult to cross the sea. The girl said, "It's not that difficult. When I came from the Western continent, I crossed the sea alone. At that time, I didn't find a suitable fleet." Wang Lu was surprised. "Crossing the sea alone? You swam here?" The girl said, "I have the spirit's blessing, so I can walk freely on the water, so I came here directly. Of course, occasionally encountering tsunamis and huge waves will be more troublesome, but generally speaking, as long as I aim straight to the east, I will eventually reach my destination." Wang Lu sighed inwardly. "No wonder not long after you arrived in 9 regions, King deserve it." Wang Lu had nothing to say. However, upon hearing the girl's words, Nie Yang inwardly disagreed and persuaded, "It's true that brilliant cultivators can fly for a long time, but even if we don't consider the direction at sea, the giant monsters lurking in the sea are no small matter. Legend has it that even a Taoist master of Yuanying stage can't resist them. If we don't follow the fleet, it would be troublesome if we encounter the sea monsters." Wang Lu was also curious, so he asked, "Aya, did you encounter a sea monster attack?" "Of course, but they were all expelled by me. However, there are indeed many strong people in the sea, so I occasionally feel uncomfortable when I fight them." When Aya crossed the sea, in theory her strength was close to that of a Unity stage cultivator. But since she still felt uncomfortable, it was not something that Wang Lu's team could deal with head-on. That being the case, "Then let's get on the ship." Wang Lu shrugged. After paying half of the fare, Wang Lu and the others boarded the fleet. Nie Yang, the person in charge of the fleet, personally led them into the 5 superior rooms on the pilot ship. The rooms of Wang Lu and the others were specially modified. They were luxuriously decorated and spacious, occupying almost the entire floor of the huge pilot ship. There were only 6 empty rooms on that floor, 5 of which were occupied by Wang Lu and the others, leaving only 1 empty room. In fact, this was the main reason for the huge fare. Otherwise, how could a few travelers cost thousands of spirit stones? Shortly after the fleet set sail, Nie Yang eagerly came to find Wang Lu. On one hand, he hurriedly expressed his apologies, and on the other hand he introduced them to a special neighbor. In this cabin, in addition to Wang Lu and the others, there was only one other passenger, and that was the one who followed behind Nie Yang. "This is our navigator Ayun." With a warm smile, Nie Yang pushed the girl next to him forward. "She is our biggest guarantee of safety on this trip to the Western continent." Wang Lu was a bit surprised to size up the girl named Ayun. She looked only 13 or 14 years old, a bit like a mixed race. Her facial features combined the characteristics of both the Eastern and Western continents. The girl had long hair like a cloud, and her skin was white and ruddy, completely unlike the weathered sea people. At the same time, the girl's dress was also luxurious. Her whole body was spotless, and her short skirt was woven with the best spirit silk, which wrapped her tender but curvy body. Her limbs were exposed, and her wrists and ankles were adorned with precious jade bracelets. Around her delicate neck, there were two necklaces. One was a string of neat and clean shells, and the other was a string of huge round pearls. Most of the trivial jewelry contained a faint immortal spirit aura, which was definitely not a mortal object. Wang Lu carefully looked at the girl in front of him. At the same time, the girl also raised her eyes, looked at Wang Lu and slightly nodded to him. Her posture was calm and generous, completely unlike a 13 or 14-year-old girl who was ignorant of the world. While nodding, Wang Lu saw that behind the girl's ear, there seemed to be a few pieces of scale-like thing growing. Nie Yang noticed Wang Lu's gaze, so he smiled and said, "Ayun is a member of the Sea Tribe, the most professional navigator of the endless sea." Sea Tribe? Yes, legend has it that they are blessed by the heaven and earth. They were born in the endless sea, and have a unique perception and affinity to this treacherous sea. As we all know, the endless sea is unpredictable, and even the most seasoned sailor cannot predict what will happen in the next moment. But the Sea Tribe are keenly aware of the changes in the sea, and can warn in advance. Similarly, the vicious beasts living in the sea usually do not attack the ships of the Sea Tribe. Therefore, as long as there is a Sea Tribe navigator in the fleet, the danger of the endless sea will be reduced by 90%. Of course, with such ability the price is naturally high. Don't look at Ayun's weak and timid appearance if you want to invite her, it is impossible. Nie Yang stretched out his hand and gestured twice, indicating 10,000 spirit stones. Wang Lu nodded, indicating that he understood. Nie Yang bringing Ayun to see them was obviously to explain why he raised the price. 10,000 spirit stones, TSK. Generally speaking, a fleet of ships can make a profit of tens of thousands of spirit stones. This was a business that risked one's life to do. But the Sea Tribe girl only needed to go out to sea to earn 10,000 spirit stones. Sure enough, knowledge is power. Nie Yang patted Ayun's shoulder and sighed with emotion. Under normal circumstances, we will not ask the Sea Tribe to come out. But some time ago, the fleet of West Tomb Port encountered sea beasts. The fleet carried many powerful cultivators. Relying on their strength, they didn't put down their offerings as usual and instead fought with the sea beasts. As a result, alas, the bandit-like sea beasts were wiped out, but they also provoked the anger of the vicious beasts in the sea. After the fleet passed through, the entire endless sea was not peaceful. Before that, 3 fleets were attacked by angry sea beasts and were completely wiped out. Now, without a Sea Tribe navigator, no one dares to go out to sea. Wang Lu waved his hand. Alright, I know we don't need to spend money. We have already paid the down payment, and when we arrive at the destination, we will naturally pay the rest. Are you afraid that we will default on the payment? We are very strict with the spirit of the contract. We will not casually use force majeure as an excuse to change the contract. Nie Yang naturally smiled bitterly, and after a moment he left with Ayun. Wang Lu watched Ayun's delicate and exquisite back gradually fade away, sighing in his heart. The West Tomb Port's fleet. Wasn't it the excavation management's fleet, led by Feng Yin Taoist master, with a particularly luxurious lineup, nicknamed the Dream Team? But in the end, it was simply a dream team. They had fought to their heart's content in the beginning, but they had left behind a terrible mess that implicated their descendants. He could only hope that the extra 2,000 spirit stones were worth it. Chapter 282. The days at sea were leisurely and comfortable. According to the scheduled voyage, Wang Lu and the others would arrive at the eastern port of the western continent after a month at sea. This speed was already quite fast. Without the guidance of the sea race girl Ayun, in order to ensure their safety, the fleet would likely spend several times more time to find a safe route on the ocean. Most of the time at sea was spent leisurely. After leaving 9 regions, the surrounding spiritual energy gradually changed, making it difficult for them to support their cultivation. Although it wouldn't cause them to lose their cultivation base, it was difficult to increase their cultivation base through meditation. Therefore, in addition to occasionally practicing their swordsmanship, most of the time was simply used for leisure. The life at sea was very fresh for them. Considering that they would likely face a difficult test after entering the western continent, they might as well take this opportunity to relax and adjust their state. Among the several people, Luli was the happiest. She grew up in the Blue River region of Spirit Sword Mountain and had never seen the sea. However, for her, who was simple in mind, the boundless sea was not boring at all. Instead, it contained endless fun. Every day she ran back and forth on the deck, sometimes flying on her flying sword, braving the wind and breaking the waves not far from the fleet. As for Bai Shixian and Quan Zhuhua, most of the time they were quietly sleeping in the guest room. Perhaps it was because their bodies as immortal beasts couldn't adapt to the change of the continent's laws as quickly as human beings, so they needed a period of recuperation. As for Aya, she obviously had a strong interest in the sea race girl Ayun. She often took the initiative to talk to her, asking about all kinds of anecdotes about the sea race. Unfortunately, Ayun's response was very cold. Most of the time, she locked herself in her room. Occasionally when she came out to breathe, she also ignored people. After being rebuffed several times, Aya could only suppress her curiosity. However, in the end she couldn't help it, so she seemed particularly uncomfortable. Wang Lu, who was watching from the side, shook his head and said to Aya, "Your way of asking questions is wrong. No wonder she doesn't like to talk to you." Aya earnestly recalled, "Did I do something rude? I'm sorry, I don't know much about the sea race, so if there's anything wrong, please advise me." Wang Lu said, "I'll give you a demonstration, then you'll know where you're lacking." Then Wang Lu brought Aya to a Yun's room and gently knocked on the door. The sea race girl coldly stood at the door and looked at Wang Lu. Her eyes revealed a questioning look. Wang Lu smiled and said, "I have some questions for you, 100 spirit stones per question, interested?" Ayun thought for a moment and moved aside to let the door open. He then waved his hand and said softly, "Please come in." Outside the room, Aya didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't know if she was depressed or impressed. Wang Lu threw a mustard seed bag filled with thousands of spirit stones to Aya and said, "You can ask all you want, I'm going to the deck to get some fresh air." After a while, Aya reluctantly brought the empty mustard seed bag to the deck and approached Wang Lu. "Thank you." "You're welcome." The two were silent for a moment. Aya smiled and asked, "Do you know a lot about the sea race?" Wang Lu shrugged his shoulders. "Not many. This is the first time I've seen a living sea race member." Aya asked, "So, are you good at judging people?" Wang Lu nodded. "Judging people? Not bad." Then he looked at Aya and said, "A cup, right?" If it weren't for the fact that Aya's body was still unstable, she would have already started fighting. Even so, Aya was still angry. Her face was extremely gloomy, hidden under the hood, like a dark cloud that was about to fall. However, at this moment, Aya's expression suddenly changed. Just as he was feeling bewildered, a barefoot young woman sprinted to the deck. She was gasping for breath, and her face was gloomy and uncertain. Wang Lu stretched out his hand and said, "Ayun?" However, Ayun didn't seem to see Wang Lu at all. He just ran straight to the side of the ship, clung to the edge of the ship with both hands, and stood on tiptoe to make his upper body as high as possible. His vision was cast into the distance of the vast ocean. His eyes looked around and his expression was full of panic. Wang Lu then turned his gaze, only to see that the left side of the pilot ship was calm. The warm sunlight sprinkled on the sea, like a layer of fragmented gold. "Is this urgent?" Aya took half a step forward, patted Wang Lu on the shoulder and said with a sinking voice, "Be careful, something is coming." A moment later, even the person in charge of the fleet, Nyeyang, came up and asked anxiously, "Yun, what's wrong?" Ayun turned her head, her eyes filled with tears. The little girl nodded vigorously, then shook her head, but she didn't know what she meant. But then, without her explanation, everyone realized that a great disaster was about to befall them. The calm sea rose without warning, as if a towering mountain had risen from the flat land. A black mound suddenly rose from the side of the ship. The next moment, the sea turned into a waterfall and fell along the edge of the mound, revealing a ferocious giant beast. It was an extremely large sea beast with an inestimable size. It had a round head and a hard, grayish-black shell. Below its head were dozens of tentacles, each of which was dozens of feet long. As the giant beast appeared, the tentacles slapped the surface of the sea, stirring up stormy waves, showing its great strength. Any one of these tentacles could crush the pilot ship into pieces. My God, such a big octopus. Seeing this amazing giant beast, Wang Lu was also shocked and involuntarily swallowed. The endless sea was full of dangers. He was tired of hearing this sentence in 9 regions. However, when he actually encountered it, it was still horrifying. Sea beast, it's a sea beast. Before long, the whole fleet fell into panic. The sailors' screams rose and fell one after another. Under the panic, the fleet quickly lost control, and the originally neat formation suddenly became chaotic. Looking at the sea beast that emerged from the water in the distance, Nyeyang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His well-maintained snow-white teeth were immediately bitten until they bled. "Ayun, what's going on?" Ayun's eyes wandered. Obviously, she didn't expect that there would be an uninvited guest on the supposedly peaceful route. As a member of the sea tribe, she had a basic sense of everything on the sea before going out to sea. Then, she could communicate with the creatures in the sea at any time to avoid those hostile sea beasts and storm-covered areas, and choose a peaceful area to advance. Just half a day ago, she had just completed a sensing and confirmed that there were no sea beasts wandering nearby. Why did such a big guy suddenly appear? Perhaps ordinary sea tribe people might not even meet one in their lifetime. At this moment, everyone in the fleet felt a bone-piercing chill from the bottom of their hearts. It was as if they were going to be frozen. The next moment, a thunderous roar swept through the ship. Many sailors with mortal physiques immediately bled from their ears and fainted. Even Ye Yang screamed as his breathing became chaotic due to the roar. Wang Lu and others were not hurt by the sound waves, but after the roar, Wang Lu couldn't help but frown, because he felt that the sea beast seemed to be saying something. It said that it smelled our scent from thousands of miles away, so it immediately rushed over. It also said that it has been waiting for this moment for a long time. Bai Shishuan's voice faintly sounded in his primordial spirit, translating for him. Wang Lu was surprised. Little Bai, you can understand it? It's probably because it's a beast. Bai Shishuan somewhat self-deprecatingly said, it seems to be seeking revenge. Damn, when did we become enemies? Is it because we ate mustard octopus for lunch? At the same time, Ayun, who was clinging to the side of the ship, suddenly moved. Although the girl's face turned red and white, obviously not feeling well, she successfully resisted the shock of the sound waves. She stood firm, looked back strangely at Wang Lu and others, and then suddenly grabbed the plank of the ship and jumped up, seemingly wanting to jump over the ship and into the sea. Aya reacted the fastest, stepped forward to hold the girl down, and warned, the sea is more dangerous. We will do our best to protect you here. Ayun struggled hard, constantly trying to get closer to the side of the ship, and screamed, let me go, let me go. Calm down. Aya stretched out her hand and firmly suppressed Ayun. Although she was less than 1/10,000th of her peak, she could easily suppress an ordinary girl. No matter how hard Ayun struggled, she couldn't get away. What are you doing? At this time, Nye Yang slowly came back to his senses and exclaimed, let her go. Otherwise all of us will die. What? At this time, the sea beast had finished its opening remarks and was rushing forward with all its strength. Nye Yang said in horror, let her go. Otherwise we will all die. She is the most important sacrifice to quell the anger of the sea god. Sacrifice. Whether it was Aya, Wang Lu, or Bai Shishuan, none of them were stupid. They immediately understood Nye Yang's explanation. No wonder the price of the sea race was so high. No wonder the little girl was covered with jewels and dressed herself as if she was going to be buried. It turned out that in addition to the navigation task, the sea race was the last insurance for the fleet. In case of a shipwreck, such as a sea beast attack or a storm, the sea race could sacrifice themselves as a sacrifice to the endless sea to quell the anger of the sea. The sea race have already made up their minds before going out to sea. If you stop her, you will only drag everyone down with you. Even Ayun himself will be ashamed. Let her go, it's too late. Nye Yang roared and made a final effort. Aya, on the other hand, calmed herself down and said to Wang Lu through primordial spirit communication, Wang Lu, help me save her. Wang Lu was surprised. Help you save her? Then he pointed to the octopus sea monster. Are you saying you want me to fight this kind of monster alone? After a pause, Wang Lu said, Aya, don't be such a saint. Although Ayun is indeed very pitiful, this is her duty, her destiny, and her consciousness. Everyone will die one day, don't take everything on yourself. Aya said, this is not taking everything on myself. The sea beast is coming for me. 100 years ago when I crossed the endless sea, I encountered it and seriously injured it. Now it has recovered and is coming for revenge. Ayun is one of the most outstanding descendants of this generation of the sea race. Her perception and navigation will never be wrong. If it weren't for me, she wouldn't have encountered this kind of fatal situation. I can't absolve myself from the blame, so it is my duty to rescue her. But I don't have enough strength now. Wang Lu was shocked. Aya, do you really have to value a lover over a friend? Ayun's life isn't meant to end, so I deserve to die? Aya quickly explained, I know this sea beast can't stop you. You have been preparing for so long on the mountain. Although there will be a price, but I beg you. Wang Lu helplessly said with a smile, since you've said it like this, then I'll go forward bravely. After all, I promised you that I would be invincible. Let's just treat this as our first battle. Aya nodded, Thank you. Although my strength is meager, I will do my best to fight side by side with you. Fight side by side? That won't be necessary. Wang Lu said and cut off the primordial spirit communication. At this time, the sea monster had already rushed to the side of the pilot ship. Then Wang Lu calmly took out something from his mustard seed bag and raised it in the air. It was a spirit sword heavenly talisman, but it was obviously different from ordinary heavenly talismans. The talisman light flashed and a white figure appeared from the light. The next moment, a layer of emerald green light cover enveloped the entire pilot ship. When the giant beast hit the light cover, its mountain-like body was bounced back and fell into the sea. TSK, it hasn't been long since we left, but you already called for outside assistance. Little Lu, can you do it? The voice in midair was a bit concerned and a bit teasing. If it wasn't Wang Wu, who else could it be? Chapter 283. Transforming the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman to achieve the reverse transmission effect was one of the most powerful cards in Wang Lu's trip to the west. The Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman was not bound to herself, but to her beloved master. Once she was in danger, she could activate the talisman with her master's magical power and send her over. Generally speaking, most of the sects would leave this life-saving means for their elite disciples, which could be used to call the elders for help at the critical moment. However, once they left 9 regions because of the change in the law, these talismans would be difficult to take effect. Only the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman could ignore the change in the law of the continent. However, according to her master, because she had transformed the talisman, the transmission effect was not permanent. It could only bring her master over for a cup of tea's time at most. Moreover, the law of the endless sea was ever-changing, so the transmission time was even shorter. However, no matter how short the time was, it was enough for this powerful summoned beast to clear the battlefield. Although non-phase method was famous for being good at defense and bad at offense, people who were familiar with Wang Wu must know that the general principle was completely ineffective against her. This time the battle was even more appalling. In just a few breaths of time, Wang Wu had wrapped the vengeful angry octopus with an emerald green sword light, and then carried it back to non-phase peak through the channel opened by the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman, leaving only a string of hearty laughter echoing on the sea. Ha ha! Alas! Watching his master's back disappear into the channel opened by the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman, Wang Lu sighed deeply. Aya, who was beside him, was still secretly shocked by the battle just now. After a moment of silence, she asked, "What's wrong? Why do you sigh?" "I'm worried about master." Aya was even more curious. "Worried about your master?" "She has an overwhelming advantage just now, not to mention returning to Spirit Sword Mountain is her home field, so there's no danger at all." Wang Lu said, "I'm worried that she, a leftover woman who has been single for more than 100 years, would carry such a big tentacle monster back. Under her insatiable desire, she might do something immoral and damage the reputation of my Spirit Sword sect. Your thinking itself has already hurt the reputation of Lingjian School." Aya couldn't bear it anymore. But very quickly she changed her mind and thought, "It's because that talisman is very valuable, right? Is your heart aching?" Wang Lu shrugged. "It's not bad. If I sell it, I can probably get a few 100,000 spirit stones." As soon as these words came out, not to mention Aya's surprise, Nye Yang exclaimed, "Hundreds of thousands of spirit stones. This is throwing money at them." The value of this entire fleet was no more than hundreds of thousands of spirit stones. After all, the fleet itself was still stuck in the mortal world, which was a world of difference from the top immortal level ships of the mysterious Sky Mansion. Wang Lu's Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman was equivalent to making a fleet disappear. Thinking of this, Nye Yang lamented, "This is too wasteful." Waste? Wang Lu keenly captured Nye Yang's meaning and could not help but frown. Nye Yang looked at Ayun, who had just escaped from death, and shook his head. Young master has a kind heart and can't bear to see Ayun buried in the sea. This kind heart is indeed touching, but the fate of the sea tribe is like this. Even if they can escape this time, one day they will walk on the same path. And the hundreds and thousands of people of the sea tribe make a living, all of them disregard their lives. Can young master be so generous to save people every time? Alas, although my words are cruel, young master's action really doesn't have much meaning. Wang Lu smiled and said, "The beauty of rich people is that they can always use money to do meaningless things. On the other hand, if you can't spend money to do meaningless things, why are you a rich person?" Nye Yang was stunned for a moment, then sighed with emotion and didn't say anything more. Wang Lu cast a glance at Aya and meaningfully said, "Rich people are like this, But isn't it the same for those with power? If you don't do things that others think are meaningless, what's the use of money and power? Aya couldn't agree, that's just a pointless show-off and waste, it's not the right way. In fact, no matter which continent, there is no custom that advocates waste. Hey Aya, you're too naive. Naive? Aya sneered and even disdained to refute. Even though she had experienced great setbacks, she was still a proud queen. Naive? Wang Lu didn't have the qualification to evaluate her like that. However, Wang Lu didn't intend to say anything. Seeing that Aya ignored him, he kept his mouth shut. Aya paused and asked Nieyang, will we leave any future trouble for you after we repel that sea beast? Nieyang replied, there won't be any future trouble. That giant octopus obviously acted alone, so no one will come to seek revenge after we killed it. That day the West Hill fleet killed a group of sea beasts, which made the sea god angry. At worst, we'll stay in the Western Continent port for a while and then return. It's good that there won't be any future trouble. Aya finally felt relieved. As she spoke, although she did not say it clearly, her body, which was originally wavering between real and illusory, gradually solidified. Later on there were no similar accidents. Under Ayun's almost perfect navigation, the fleet bypassed all the risks in the endless sea and safely arrived at their destination, the port city on the east coast of the Western Continent. Nieyang led the fleet to unload and rest at the port, while Wang Lu and the others went ashore, ready to start a new adventure. Before leaving, Ayun took off her 2 necklaces and gave them to Wang Lu and Aya. The more expensive pearl necklace was given to Aya, and the shell necklace was given to Wang Lu. Obviously, although the little girl was taciturn, she clearly knew who gave her life. At first, Aya insisted on refusing it. After all, that octopus came for her. However, Ayun was unusually firm. She kept kowtowing on the ground. Finally, Aya took a step back and divided the pearl necklace into 2, only taking one, which made Ayun reluctantly nod. After saying goodbye to Ayun, the group entered the port city of Deep Earth City. As one of the trade hubs between the East and West continent, Deep Earth City was no less prosperous than Heaven's Road. The city was also full of high-rise buildings and traffic. The unique culture of the Western continent was too much to take in. However, what really caught people's attention was the law of the Western continent. For the natives of the Western continent, this so-called law was invisible and colorless, silently moisturizing. However, for the cultivators from 9 regions, this law, which was very different from the 9 regions, made people feel particularly uncomfortable. It was like creatures that were used to running on land were suddenly sunk into the sea, or fish in the water were dragged ashore. The great change in the environment was simply suffocating. This was the wall of law, which prevented most cultivators from going to the Western continent. Cultivators below the level of King Pill could hardly pass through the wall of law to display the various magical abilities that they cultivated in the 9 regions. Even the strength of their bodies was greatly reduced. During this period, it was even more difficult for them to cultivate, making them completely useless. Generally speaking, only cultivators above the level of King Pill could retain their cultivation base after crossing the sea. Because when they advanced to the level of King Pill, they would condense the main path on the King Pill, so that their jade mansion would be unified like a small world, endlessly growing and multiplying, without the need for external force. However, even if it was a cultivator above the level of King Pill, if their foundation was not solid enough, they would also be weakened by the wall of law. Only those at the nascent soul stage or soul formation stage could completely ignore the influence of the wall of laws, because at that level, cultivators would have great comprehension and integration abilities. Even if they were in a strange environment, they would be able to use their own abilities to deduce and adapt to new laws. Among Wang Lu and the others, only Bai Shen could barely be called King Pill level. Wang Lu and Lu Li were still in Shudan stage. However, as successor disciples of Lingjian school, their foundation was deep, so they didn't really care about the wall of law. In particular, Lu Li was the fastest to adapt. Soon after they disembarked from the boat, she gradually adapted to the law of the Western continent. Although the flying sword in her sleeve was somewhat sluggish and erratic, she could basically revolve around her as she pleased. Wang Lu cultivated non-phase method, so his magical power was restrained, not revealing anything. Walking in the Deep Earth City, he looked calm and composed, except that occasionally he would stop for half a step to adjust his breath. According to Master, before the King Pill is formed, there's no harm in seeing more laws. And under the suppression of the law of the Western continent, persevering in cultivation would yield twice the result with half the effort. Aya and Wang Lu walked side by side at the front of the team. Listening to Wang Lu's words, she couldn't help but nod. You are indeed more hardworking than you look. No wonder you have such achievements in just 10 years of cultivation. Wang Lu said, genius is 99% IQ plus 1% inspiration. Hey, it seems like there's no place for sweat? Aya couldn't help but laugh. Wang Lu said, it seems like you're in good condition now? After all, this is the land I'm familiar with. Here, I can feel that my strength is slowly recovering. Aya closed her eyes, clenched her fists, and then softly said, I'm back. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu gawked and then frowned. Are you going to eat first or eat me first? Under the guidance of the native Aya, the group found a small shop in Deep Earth City, but it was a shop with a hidden mystery. According to Aya's introduction, this was a branch of a secret chamber of commerce with tentacles all over the eastern part of the western continent. With a special seal, she gained the trust of the owner and saw a special purchase list in the basement. Then Wang Lu bought a high-end carriage with a large amount of gold and other hard currency that he had prepared in 9 regions. The carriage was pulled by several nightmarish beasts that tread on flames. Their speed was astonishingly fast, and when needed they could fly into the sky or burrow into the ground. Moreover, the interior of the carriage was also transformed by the spell of the western continent, making it very spacious, which was similar to Wang Lu's private bus, Lingyun 2000 in 9 regions. The purchase of the carriage was to facilitate travel. In the western continent, many of the magical treasures refined by 9 regions were difficult to use. Moreover, in order to be less conspicuous, it was best to disguise as a local traveler. After coming out of the shop, the group boarded the carriage and headed west. According to the plan, they would stay in the next city for a while and then go straight to Taobao. Chapter 284. 2 majestic nightmare beasts pulled an exquisite and luxurious carriage along the smooth and tidy road outside Deep Earth City, heading straight to the capital of the largest trading kingdom in the east. Although the eastern kingdom was vast, the nightmare beasts traveled like flying. In less than half a day they could cross thousands of miles to reach the capital. At that time, the people in the carriage would make their final preparations and go straight to the most famous historical site in the western continent. Generally speaking, even in the relatively affluent eastern part of the western continent, such a carriage was rare. The 2 nightmare beasts pulling the carriage were extraordinary. As for the wheels that were vaguely surrounded by lightning, it showed that the owner's life experience was extraordinary. Usually only the city masters of those big cities could own such a carriage. Even though the carriage was light and did not have any guards accompanying it, there were very few people who dared to try and intercept it as it traveled through the wilderness. The eastern part of the western continent, because of its abundance of resources and prosperous trade, was much better than the western part, and the crackdown on crime was also more severe. In particular, the governors of the various countries and cities were in close contact with each other. Once they offended a high-ranking official, they would become a street rat wherever they went. Wang Lu and his team did not hesitate to buy the carriage in order to avoid trouble. However, perhaps it was really destined that the road to happiness was strewn with setbacks. Shortly after the carriage left Deep Earth City, they encountered a group of robbers. The strength of the robbers who dared to attack the carriage pulled by the nightmare beasts was naturally extraordinary. Before the people in the carriage could react, the sky suddenly turned blood red, and the smooth road ahead was lost in a red mist. In the sky, 10 hazy silhouettes floated quietly, looking down from above. The next moment, lightning flashed and thunder roared. The blood-colored lightning fell from the sky and bombarded the roof of the carriage. The strange beast statue on the roof collapsed into pieces, and at the same time, the body of the carriage violently shook. Inside the carriage, Wang Lu and the others were surprised. This ambush was fast and ruthless. The blood-colored lightning strike destroyed the protective statue on the carriage. Its power was not inferior to. Well, if converted to 9 region standard, it was the full power strike of Taoist Master King Pil, Xiaoming. Although the carriage was luxurious, it was not a chariot. There were only 3 protective statues on the roof, and they could not be regenerated. Wang Lu raised his head and saw that not only did the thunderclouds above his head not dissipate, they were even denser. After the blood-colored thunderbolts struck down, blood rain began to fall, polluting everything in the world. Even if one only looked at this method, one could see that it was brilliant. It was hard to imagine that they had met random robbers. Wang Lu was surprised. Aya, is this another enemy you made 100 years ago? Just how many outrageous things did you do in the past for you to have so many enemies? My enemies are everywhere on the sea and on the land. I was also very surprised. Being questioned by Wang Lu, she was tongue-tied for a long time before she said, "It wasn't me." "It's you? Don't quibble. If it wasn't you, could it be my enemy?" Aya found it hard to argue. "But I don't even know those people." "That's because you killed their parents in the past, and now their children and grandchildren have come to seek revenge." Aya was stunned, and then she actually began to ponder. In the past, when she went on expeditions in all directions, even though the direction of the horse's hooves were all righteous, she had indeed killed a lot of people. Could it be that? That's not right. My country is far away in the west, so how could there be someone who would travel thousands of miles to ambush me and seek revenge? It's really not me. Seeing that Aya was really angry, Wang Lu waved his hand. "Forget it, no matter if it's me or not, in any case they have come to my door, so I can't just not fight back. Aya, save your favorable impression so that you can see how amazing I am when I go out." With that, Wang Lu beckoned Lu Li and the others out of the carriage. At this time, the third statue has been broken by the blood-colored thunderbolt, and the fourth thunderbolt was brewing, which could fall at any time. Wang Lu stepped out against the rain of blood outside the carriage. However, just as he took a step, he felt his body suddenly sank. A void core in his jade mansion violently shook, as if it was about to fall apart. "What?" At the same time, Lu Li, who followed closely behind, also exclaimed, "My magical power is a bit disobedient? This is the law suppression?" Aya, who was at the back of the team, was the most sensitive. She immediately said, "These people used a special method to stimulate the law of the Western continent to fully suppress you. They are deliberately targeting the cultivators of 9 regions." Aya was indeed worthy to be the former king. Her reaction was fast and accurate. In just one sentence she revealed the truth. In fact, this group of robbers was indeed targeting the cultivators of 9 regions. Just as Aya revealed the truth, a person in the sky was surprised. "There's actually a local?" That person spoke in the common language of the eastern continent of the western continent. Before coming here, Wang Lu and the others had done their homework so they could understand it. Another person in the sky said, "Humph, so what if they're local? Since they're with the yellow-skinned monkey, they're obviously not good people. They don't seem to have any strength, so we can just kill them. Hee, this time we've caught a big fish. These people are not strong, but they're rich. We're going to get rich. Killing these yellow-skinned monkeys is really a shortcut to get rich. Although their strength is good, as long as we use this bloodstained scroll, we can make them reveal their true colors. Those 500 magic coins are really not a loss." In just a few words, Wang Lu wrinkled his brows. Someone in the western continent was specifically targeting the cultivators of 9 regions? They even developed this blood-stained scroll, which stimulated the law of the western continent to suppress them. This kind of suppression didn't matter to the local people of western continent, but it was very fatal to the people of 9 regions. Even those Taoist masters of the King Pill realm, when the blood-stained scroll stimulated the law of the western continent, would lose their Tao heart and lose their cultivation base. Perhaps only those old monsters with Yuanying stage or even deity stage could ignore the law and still exert their strength. However, nowadays the cultivators from 9 regions who came to western continent were mostly King Pill realm cultivators. Except for the dream team led by Feng Yin Taoist master, most of the teams formed by various sects were 1 or 2 Yuanying stage cultivators with more than 10 King Pill realm cultivators. Thus, when encountering this blood-stained scroll, 9 out of 10 of them would not be able to resist. Wang Lu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The western continent was indeed full of capable people. He had never heard of this blood-stained scroll before. Obviously, after a large number of 9 regions cultivators entered the western continent, the genius alchemists of the western continent developed it and spread it everywhere. 500 magic coins was indeed not expensive. According to the same purchasing power, it could be converted into 500 spirit stones. Compared to the harvest of killing a group of 9 regions cultivators, it was simply a drop in the bucket, extremely cheap. The strength of the 10 people in the sky was not weak. According to the standard of the western continent, although they had different professions, they were all high-order professions such as sword master, spirit master, and so on. In 9 regions they were between Shudan stage and King Pill realm cultivators. 10 people together, coupled with the blood-stained scroll that scattered the opponent's cultivation base, not to mention Wang Lu's team, even if there was a Yuanying stage elder leading the team, with more than 10 King Pill realm cultivators here, they would still die. "Do it." The person in the sky shouted and swooped down with a pair of pale golden wings on his back. That was the captain of this group of adventurers, a great sword master who was best at charging and breaking through enemy lines. Seeing that their captain had made his move, several of his teammates also followed suit. For a time, it was as if a dark cloud covered the sky. Their power was astonishing. Generally, the 9 regions cultivators team would immediately scatter under their charge, and then it would be a one-sided massacre. However, this time they really found the wrong person. Wang Lu and Lu Li were indeed temporarily troubled by the bloodstained scroll, but there was still a real killer in their team. Ridiculous, you want to rely on numbers? I'm going to close the door and release the dog. Hey, eat him for me. As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, a thunderous roar exploded, and a giant gray shadow suddenly expanded. 2 rows of blade-like teeth flashed in front of everyone's eyes. The next moment, the robbers who swooped down suddenly felt that there seemed to be one less person next to them. They looked at each other, and a moment later, their hearts were filled with horror. Captain? The momentum of the robbers' dive came to an abrupt halt. One by one, the robbers stopped their momentum and hovered in mid-air. This time, there were 6 people who swooped down, and all of them were close combat professions. Originally, the victory was already in their grasp, but just now, the gray shadow flashed, and the captain who rushed at the front had disappeared. When they looked again, they saw on the ground, a giant dog with a body as strong as an elephant was chewing something. Blood and minced meat continued to overflow from the gap between its teeth and flowed to the ground. A moment later, that giant dog spat out a ball-like thing, which was the head of the captain who died with a remaining grievance. Captain? Several people's eyes widened in anger as if their eye sockets were about to tear. As a great swordmaster-level captain, he had always been an invincible meat grinder in close combat. Unexpectedly, at this moment, he was swallowed by that strange beast without even struggling. Damn it, whether it was these yellow-skinned monkeys of 9 regions, or their spirit beasts and spirit pets, under the blood-stained scroll, their cultivation base should have been scattered, and they should have no resistance at all. However, they didn't know that this raging evil beast was the condensation of the Western continent's natural law. Under the blood-stained scroll, its strength would only be stronger. And Fenrir was best at close combat. According to legend, even the gods did not dare to be too close to Fenrir. While the several swordmasters and berserkers who specialized in close combat were still in shock, that giant dog had already digested the captain's body. It grinned, suddenly pounced into the air and once again began to fight. Its speed was so fast that people were completely unable to react. Its big mouth opened and closed, and a person was swallowed whole, leaving no room for resistance. Several close combat professions tried to fight back, but their weapons hit the thick fur, but they were completely powerless. It was a one-sided massacre. Ah! Quickly help! A swordmaster screamed and roared for help. Just now he was too late to dodge and his arm was bitten off by that evil dog. He knew that this evil dog was absolutely invincible in close combat. At this time, only the magician, priest, mage and other long-range professions in the sky could barely cope with it. The long-range professions naturally would not just stand by and watch. Each of them displayed their magical abilities. Some condensed the blood-colored thunder in the sky, some drew their bows and shot arrows with divine power, and some recited hymns to summon the wrath of the gods. If these long-range professions focused their fire, even if Quan Zohua was an immortal beast, it would not be able to withstand it. After all, its cultivation time was too short. However, at this time, a clear woman's voice leisurely floated through his mind. Although the swordmaster did not understand the language used by the woman, he inexplicably understood her meaning. Yes, I have understood the law of this land. The woman in white floated forward and stretched out her hand to prop up a thick brown earth light, which isolated all the attacks from the sky. The eyes of Mother Earth are watching us. The next moment, the woman flipped her other hand and aimed at the sky. In the palm of her hand, the roaring thunder symbolizing destruction rolled and jumped. The power of the elements will destroy you. Chapter 285. An angry roar of thunder bloomed from Bai Shishuan's hand, which turned into a raging storm that pierced the sky. The 4 long-range professions in the sky were all shrouded in lightning. The strength of those 4 long-range professions was not weak, but no one expected that this group of Eastern cultivators, under the suppression of the blood-stained scroll, still had the strength to resist. Therefore they didn't do too much protection and put all of their power into the attack. At this time they were suddenly counterattacked, completely caught off guard. Moreover, what shocked them even more was Bai Shishuan's counterattack. That was by no means the means of any Eastern cultivator. These days they have intercepted and killed some Eastern adventurers and some won and some lost. However, in any case, They had already seen the means of Eastern cultivators, which was completely different from the mystical power of the Western continent. Among them, although there was no lack of means to summon lightning, it was absolutely not like now, where the lightning storm was filled with a strong elemental force. This elemental taste was clearly, damn it, how could it be an elemental shaman? Moreover, it's a high-level shaman. The magician angrily clenched his wand. The magical pool in his body crazily poured out power to support a thick and plain insulating shield. At the risk of damaging his magical pool, he was finally able to isolate all of the lightning energy outside. However, his companion was not so lucky. The archer has no self-defense ability. In the face of the elemental force, the only thing he could rely on was the magician and priest. However, they were too busy to take care of the archer. Unprepared, he could only try his best to flap the wings on his back, trying to retreat. However, just as he flapped his wings, his torso was pierced by the electric current, and he screamed and fell down. The other mage also didn't escape. She was good at summoning and needed time, but she was caught off guard and lacked the time. While the magician and priest were busy with other things, the magic item she carried was not enough to resist Bai Shishuan's lightning storm. After struggling for a moment, the magic item shattered with a loud bang. The mage herself was also engulfed by the lightning. "AKA save me?" Accompanied by a scream, the mage turned into ashes. AKA, who was called out by her before she died, was holding his wand, trying to alleviate the shock of the magical pool. He didn't even dare to say half a word, for fear that he would not be able to suppress the backlash and explode his magical pool. However, as one of the only two members in the team who could buff and protect his teammates, he didn't help, which worsened the situation. By the time the lightning storm subsided, more than half of the 10-man adventurer team had died. Magician Akka struggled to stay in the air. He felt dizzy and could not believe what he was seeing. Although the 10 of them didn't dare to say that they were influential figures in the Western continent, they were still accustomed to the wind and waves. A few years ago they even dared to go to the Dragon Cave to explore for treasures. Unexpectedly they were defeated here. However, at least I'm still alive. The mage Akka composed himself and looked at the priest who believed in the holy light beside him. The two of them were the only ones in the team who still had strength left and were not completely trapped in the battle. They looked at each other and had the same thought: if we want to escape, now is the time. Years of tacit understanding made it unnecessary for them to speak more. The priest immediately overdrew his faith and released 2 holy shields to bless both of them. Then the magician stimulated the mana pool and added a pair of wings for each of them, ready to spread the wings and fly away. This was their only chance. That ferocious beast was fighting with the remaining 2 melee professions. Although it had the upper hand, it was still wounded by the explosion of its teammates before their death. And that terrifying high-order elemental shaman, after releasing the lightning storm, also fell into a state of paralysis due to the overload. The others were either still trapped by the bloodstained scroll or didn't have the means of long-range attack, so there was nothing to worry about. It was just that, what the hell, how could these Easterners have the means of Western continent people? If they knew that among this group of people, there was a strange beast that could not be restricted by the bloodstained scroll, a high-order elemental shaman, no matter what, they would have been prepared in advance. How could they fall into the situation where half of their people died? The great wizard who sold the bloodstained scroll claimed that as long as they didn't provoke the legendary level Eastern cultivator, with the bloodstained scroll, it was enough to sweep everything. But now that was not the case at all. They were really fooled. With a strong sense of confusion and anger, the magician aka began to flap his wings, bringing a strong gust of wind, carrying him to a higher and farther place to escape. While flying, he began to think about how to take revenge. As the wise man of the team, he didn't have to always be in the front like the captain, but when the captain fell, he was duty-bound to take revenge. This group of Eastern cultivators, in terms of strength alone, was not too strong. The team's failure was because they were caught off guard. So, as long as they went back to regroup and recruit a few high-order professions with the same strength, they could still defeat the opponent. After all, the other party could only threaten one person and one beast. And at that time, the pain that he had suffered today he would inflict 10 times, 100 times more on these Easterners. However, just as the magician secretly swore, a cold voice came into his ears. Offended the abbot and still want to leave? The magician was startled. He didn't have time to think about where the voice came from. He urged his wings with all his strength, crazily flying into the sky like an arrow. However, after flapping his wings twice, he found something strange. The blood cloud above his head seemed to be a bit different than before. The patter of blood rain had also stopped at some point in time. The effect of the bloodstained scroll had disappeared? It shouldn't be, only less than a third of the time had passed. AKA, we seem to be trapped, my connection with the holy light has been cut off. The priest companion's slightly panicked voice also sounded at this time. As a high-order profession, the priest's soul had long been inextricably linked with the sea of holy light that he believed in, but at this time he felt that this connection had been cut off. Fortunately, this was not the first time this kind of experience had happened. When entering some special space, the original connection may be cut off, but as long as one prayed again, the connection could be re-established. But the question was, when did they enter a special space? AKA, what's going on? The magician's face was gloomy. Using his wand as a medium, he released a few spells to explore the surroundings. He said coldly, "We are trapped." It's a spell similar to the maze spell. This is no longer the space we were in before. With that, he turned around and looked down at the ground. The original clean stone path and the elegant scenery on both sides were gone, replaced by a broken land. Thousands of broken swords stood erect on the ground like tombstones. The sky and clouds overhead were still the color of blood, but it was different from the dark and terrifying color of the blood-stained scroll. It was more of a heroic color. Obviously, this was no longer the original space. Welcome to my world. Hey, it's really not easy to launch one's original magical ability in the Western continent. Fortunately, your Western continent also has a similar method. Finally, I found it. At this time, Wang Lu was completely different from the time when he was suppressed by the blood-stained scroll, where he couldn't control his magical power. In the forest of swords he calmly walked. Each step just happened to step on the gap between the countless swords. The forest of swords also gently trembled along with his footsteps, as if to express their allegiance. With an absolute advantage, Wang Lu was not in a hurry to make his move. It seemed that he just wanted to keep the other party here. The magician AKA's mind quickly turned. The other party said that you also have a similar method, and he finally found it. What does this mean? Could it be that? After all, he was a knowledgeable profession. AKA quickly thought of a possibility: universal law, cultivation-based transformation. Although it was unimaginable, it was the only possibility. The so-called universal law referred to the fact that although there were many differences between the 9 regions and the Western continent, in essence, there were still many similarities. For example, when an apple is ripe, it will always fall to the ground. Above the 9th heaven is a void. In the deep sea there are tens of thousands of tons of pressure. Although there were many subtle differences, especially for the more powerful the individual, the more obvious the difference. For example, the Eastern cultivators paid particular attention to enlightenment. Brilliant cultivators would integrate the great Tao of heaven and earth into their jade mansion. However, the strong people of the Western continent didn't have such a unified concept. The path to the highest level was strange, not as unified as that of the 9 regions. With such a huge difference, the result was that when they set foot on another continent, it was likely that they would be suppressed by the law and their cultivation base would be scattered. Therefore, for thousands of years, although the communication between the 2 continents was increasingly frequent, it was more of a mortal's interaction. When one reached the high-order profession, they would be very cautious. However, thousands of years ago, when the civilizations of the Eastern and Western continent collided for the first time, a great sage pointed out that within the complex appearance, there were many similarities between the 2 continents. As long as one could grasp these similarities, it was possible to achieve the cultivation-based transformation and break through the wall of law. Of course, this required an exceptionally brilliant perception. Rumor has it that during the first war between the Eastern and Western continent, there was a brilliant swordsman from the 9 regions who, after landing on the Western continent, became a sword saint of the Western continent. There was also an example of a magister from the Western continent who went to the 9 regions and comprehended the 9 regions' immortal path. However, those only existed in the history books and their authenticity was doubtful. In fact, in recent years, there were countless strong people who died in a foreign land, regardless of whether it was the Eastern or Western continent. However, not many people were able to comprehend the law and successfully transform their cultivation base. Only some people with low cultivation base could do it. The more powerful one was, the more difficult it was to transform. Although there was still a long way to go from the legendary realm to the high-order profession, it was very difficult to transform the cultivation base. And now, right in front of him, a high-order profession from the 9 regions, in just a few moments, comprehended the law and transformed the cultivation base? Was this a miracle? In fact, Wang Lu didn't exaggerate that he could comprehend the law and break the wall of law in just a few moments. When he crossed the endless sea with the fleet, he had gradually come into contact with the law of the Western continent. After he went ashore, he did not stop to take the opportunity to comprehend the law of the Western continent, trying to find the part of the law that could be combined with his non-phase method. One of the biggest characteristics of non-phase method was its strong adaptability. Soon he had a bond with the law of the Western continent. And when the blood-stained scroll fell, the law of the Western continent suppressed him in all directions, which suddenly became the opportunity for a breakthrough. At this time the magician Akka was also thinking. The broken sword world where he was now seemed to be the rumored inherent enchantment, which was different from the general maze technique. The difficulty of breaking through was much higher. However, since the other party didn't immediately kill him, it meant that there was still room for mediation. On the one hand he might as well use words to delay, on the other hand he unfolded the magic array to try to break it. If it was an Eastern magic array he knew that he was powerless. However, if it was a Western continent magic array, perhaps there was a glimmer of hope. Therefore, he immediately opened his mouth to try to delay the time. However, just as he brewed his lines, he felt a chill behind his back and a sword tip appeared in front of his chest. The holy shield that was given to him by the priest was actually gone. Feeling the rapid loss of his life, the magician tried his best to turn around and saw an innocent smiling face. He didn't know when a beautiful and peerless girl stood behind him. Her right hand was holding an ancient 9-region sword, and the sword was not stained with the slightest bit of blood. Be careful behind you. Chapter 286. What do you think? After withdrawing his original magical ability, Wang Lu didn't care about the magician and priest who fell from mid-air and just asked Aya with a smile. Aya said, "Very powerful, you always surprise me." For Aya, the destruction of that team of adventurers was not surprising. Although their bloodstained scroll was a new thing, under the cover of the bloodstained scroll, the power of the 10 people's concentrated fire was really amazing. However, if Wang Lu couldn't even overcome such a crisis, then he was not the Wang Lu that Aya was familiar with. However, even so, Aya didn't expect that Wang Lu and the others actually solved the problem in the most direct way: universal law, cultivation-based conversion. Demon Wolf Fenrir was a native creature of the Western continent, but for some reason it ran to 9 regions. Because it grew up in 9 regions, it could be considered as having 2 advantages. Bai Shirshen was a mountain spirit, so she had the deepest understanding of the mountains and rivers. Moreover, immortal beasts were psychic, so in terms of perception, they were often stronger than complex human beings. However, Wang Lu and Lu Li have solidly comprehended the laws of the Western continent and immediately applied what they learned. Was cultivation-based conversion that difficult? Not necessarily. Aya herself completed the cultivation-based conversion in 9 regions as a legendary profession, from the Night King to the Sword Immortal of 9 regions. Although she rarely made her move in 9 regions, people on Spirit Sword Mountain were very clear that when she went all out, her strength was comparable to that of a Supreme of Unity stage. Of course, when her body of the brave departed was incomplete, going all out was tantamount to suicide. However, it took Aya more than 10 years to complete the cultivation-based conversion. Of course, that was because her cultivation base was too high, which was why it was slow. However, Wang Lu was able to comprehend the law in just a few days, including the time after sailing at sea near the Western continent, which was really admirable. Aya suddenly felt that her body of the brave departed had become a bit more solid, which made her startled. Obviously, it was because her trust in Wang Lu had increased a bit, which strengthened her sense of identity with the way to win the war, thus her body of the brave departed had become more stable. If this continues, perhaps one day it will really be possible. However, when he thought of his country that had already passed away, he could not see any hope at all. However, that was not something to consider now. For the time being, let's see how far Wang Lu could go. In response to Aya's praise, Wang Lu smiled and placed his right fist on his chest. "I will fight for you, my queen." Aya was stunned for a moment. Looking at the familiar etiquette, she felt as if she had returned to more than 100 years ago. She stood in the hall surrounded by her ministers, shining brightly. Her Royal Highness was a group of steel-like knights, invincible and successful. The best men of the kingdom gathered in one place, fervently swearing eternal loyalty to their king. But in the blink of an eye, the illusion in front of her was restrained by Aya's strong willpower. The woman nodded and corrected him. "Your posture is correct, but strictly speaking, I am not a queen." Not considered a queen? Wang Lu was a bit puzzled. Before he set off, he vowed to help Aya restore her country, so naturally he had to check the relevant information. The information in 9 regions was limited, but Aya's former Night King name could be considered as illustrious, which was recorded in some historical records of the Western continent. How could she not be a queen? Could it be because... After thinking about it, Wang Lu comforted her with a smile. Don't belittle yourself like that. Although it's only a cup, at least your face is good looking. It doesn't matter if you call me queen. Even though Aya had always been known for her tolerance and humility at this time, she also felt that it was good to occasionally kill. However, it was related to her own reputation and even the reputation of the kingdom, so Aya seriously explained, when I was on the throne, I didn't show myself as a woman to the world. Except for a few people, most people didn't even know that I was a woman. This was, of course, to maintain the majesty of the king. If Aya was in another profession it would be fine. However, with her petite and exquisite body, she walked the most valiant knight path. A female knight might be a beautiful story in the folklore, but in the end, it was not as oppressive as a man. However, as soon as Aya finished her explanation, she felt that things were going to get worse. Sure enough, as soon as her voice fell, she saw that Wang Lu looked at her with more sympathy. Unexpectedly, no one knew about it. I can understand your pain. My condolences. Condolences what? Aya was seething with anger. She felt that her many years of upholding the knight's spirit had been insulted. If this happened 100 years ago, a duel would be inevitable. However, this time it was too late. Because when Aya was ready to carefully argue with Wang Lu, another group of uninvited guests came. It was a team of knights riding on horses and wearing silver armors. From afar they were very aggressive. After returning to the Western continent, Aya's strength continued to recover. When she first saw this team of knights, her eyes could not help but turn cold. The strength of these people was quite good. Each of them was on the threshold of being promoted to a high-order profession. In 9 regions they were around Shudan stage. Their equipment and horses were extraordinary. If they were put on the battlefield, if there were no opponents with the same strength, perhaps tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of troops would be scattered. Even in her kingdom, which was famous for producing outstanding knights, this was still considered an expert. And here, in the vicinity of Deep Earth City, if she wasn't mistaken, they should be the personal guards of Deep Earth City's city lord. When Aya saw the 2 gray-brown robed shield guards at the back of the team of knights, she was even more sure of her conjecture. Because they were the specialty of Deep Earth City, Deep Earth Guardians. They wore heavy armor and could communicate with the earth and borrow the power of the earth. The strength of these 2 people was not inferior to the dozen people in front of them. They should be the right and left arms of the city master. The mounts of the team of knights were very spirited. In just a moment they arrived at the front. The leader of the team glanced at Wang Lu and the others. Especially when he saw the tragic battlefield next to the carriage, he could not help but frown and sternly asked, "What's going on here? Tell me honestly." This bad tone and attitude caused a backlash on the spot. Wang Lu sneered. "It's none of your business that I, your father, am killing people." Impudent. The group of knights shouted in unison. Several of them simply pulled out their swords, ready to use force to deter them. As the personal guards of the city master, most of them had rich experience. Seeing this bloody scene, how could they not see the cause of the matter? As an important trade hub between the East and West continent, in recent months, Deep Earth City has received many cultivators from 9 regions. And then, robberies and murders of 9 regions people were not uncommon. Initially it started from the nearby larger port city, Wuxia City, and then gradually spread to Deep Earth City. At present, it was obvious that they were killed instead of killing people. From the scene, it could be seen that these 9 regions cultivators were ambushed on the road. In fact, most of the recent killings were like this. It was just that, these people had special means so that they didn't repeat the mistakes of others. Instead, they made the determined ambushers lose their lives one after another. Therefore, it was reasonable to say that they were the victims. However, the knights present could not sympathize with the victims. Each and every one of them had a gloomy face. Especially when they heard Wang Lu's reaction, they glared at him, wishing that they could help those ambushers and catch all these 9 regions cultivators in one fell swoop. When the situation was tense, a Deep Earth Guardian at the back of the team said, "We are the personal guards of the city master of Deep Earth City. We found traces of a fierce fight outside the city, so we came to check it out." Seeing the friendly attitude of this Deep Earth Guardian, Wang Lu also put on a smiling face. "Oh, it's your duty, I understand. Your dispatch speed is quite fast." The Deep Earth Guardian nodded. If there is any big fight within a certain distance of Deep Earth City, we will be the first to be alerted, especially in a situation like this. Wang Lu said, "Oh, I see. Comrades, you've worked hard. Goodbye." With that, he turned around and was about to board the carriage. "Stop, who said you can leave?" The silver-armored knight captain sternly shouted, "After killing so many people, you want to leave?" Wang Lu turned around and said, "What? Do you want to avenge these robbers? When did Deep Earth City collude with these robbers?" "Shut up. Even if you're a barbarian from a different continent, you should know that you must abide by the laws of that place. According to the Deep Earth Code of Deep Earth City, after a murder, whether you're the murderer or the victim, you must be investigated by Deep Earth City." "Oh, no matter who it is, they must be investigated? What if it's your father?" Seeing that the two of them were at loggerheads and a battle was about to break out at any moment, the Deep Earth Guardian hurriedly said, "The reason why we set this rule is so that we can grasp more information and better maintain the security of this place to prevent more murders from happening. I hope you can understand and cooperate with us." Seeing that Wang Lu and the others didn't respond, obviously unwilling to cooperate, the guard continued, "Recently, some adventurers have intercepted and killed 9 regions cultivators, which has attracted the attention of many nearby city masters. The master of Deep Earth City once said that if someone can help him solve this matter, he is willing to thank them. He said that most of the cultivators from 9 regions who came across the sea are here for treasure hunting, and the most famous treasure hunting place in Western Continent is Taba City. When the master of Deep Earth City was young, he experienced many adventures in Taba City. His experience and harvest will certainly help you." Thereupon Wang Lu's heart was immediately moved. Of course, he didn't care about the general sense of gratitude. As the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques, what kind of rare treasure couldn't he get? However, if it was the strategy of Taba City, then it was worth paying attention to. "Very well, lead the way." The Deep Earth Guardian suddenly felt relieved. If they had a conflict with this group of 9 regions cultivators, regardless of the outcome, the master of Deep Earth City would certainly be furious. When Wang Lu agreed to go back to the city with the Deep Earth Knights to cooperate with the investigation, the rest naturally had no objection. The knight captain still had a gloomy face as if he had a feud with someone who killed his father. Along the way, the Deep Earth Guardian explained to Wang Lu, "Your Excellency, please don't mind his attitude, he also has his own difficulties. Some time ago, because the 9 regions cultivators were frequently intercepted and killed, one of your strong people vented his anger on the civilians and massacred tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians in Stormwind City. And the captain's family happened to be in Stormwind City, so he inevitably..." Hearing this, Wang Lu was horrified. Massacred civilians? Chapter 287. Massacring civilians? At that time Wang Lu was startled. What kind of thing was coming to the Western Continent these days? Since the news that the key to the group of immortal tombs might be in the Western Continent was leaked, Wang Lu did not expect that group of miscellaneous soldiers could reflect the high quality that 9 regions cultivators should have. With a large number of cultivators from second and third-rate sects crossing the ocean, the occurrence of low-quality incidents was simply a matter of course. After all, in the Western Continent, there was no Wanxian League to maintain the law and order of the world, and there was no terrifying Ninth Heaven Thunder tribulation. After killing and arson, as long as one brushed one's clothes and safely returned from the ocean, there would be no consequences at all. Could the Western Continent people form a group to go to 9 regions for revenge? Since the first contact between the Eastern and Western civilizations, similar things have happened from time to time. It was just that it was rare to see a city being massacred. Even if there was no heavenly tribulation in the Western Continent, would they not be afraid of the demon heart tribulation after returning to 9 regions? Or was there really a devil sect that came to join in the fun? Wang Lu thought about it and could not help but sigh with emotion. This is simply pulling down the lower limit of the people of 9 regions. Although my Lingjian school has never regarded itself as the maintainer of the order of 9 regions, when encountering this kind of thing, I can't just stand by and do nothing. Tiske, a city massacre is rarely seen in 9 regions, but this is an eye-opener in the Western Continent. Therefore please forgive his rudeness just now. After the Stormwind City incident, the people in several nearby cities have a more extreme impression of the people of 9 regions, so their attitude is inevitably offensive. Although the initial dialogue was full of unpleasantness, on the way back to the Deep Earth City, the Deep Earth Guardian repeatedly apologized to Wang Lu, which made him unable to lose his temper. Before long, the group returned to the Deep Earth City and met the master of the Deep Earth City, Sir Haddock, in a heavy fortress. Sir Haddock was a standard Western knight, and looked to be in his 40s or 50s. Time had chiseled lines into his meticulous face, but his neatly trimmed beard and short hair, and his sparkling eyes showed that he still had great energy. When they met, he was wearing casual clothes. Apart from the decorative sword on his waist, he didn't have any equipment that could be called armed. However, Wang Lu still felt a strong pressure when they met face to face. This Lord of Deep Earth City was at least a high-grade profession. Moreover, he was quite strong even among high-grade professions. He alone was stronger than the entire personal guards. This was also the norm of the city-states in the eastern part of the Western continent. Most high-grade professions were inextricably linked to the mortal world, and the lords of cities and even countries were usually held by high-grade and legendary professions. This was very different from the path of immortals and mortals in 9 regions. So when he saw Sir Haddock, Wang Lu was not surprised by his strength. But when Jazz opened his mouth, everyone was taken aback. "Everyone, I already know what happened to you." In contrast, even Aya, the heroic spirit girl who had lived in 9 regions for decades, seemed to lack some of its charm. Seeing the surprised face of Wang Lu and the others, Sir Haddock gently explained, "I found that when dealing with 9 regions people, if I can speak the native 9 regions language, I can always get unexpected benefits. You people attach much more importance to cultural identity than us. Later, I found out that I also have some talent in the Knight's Path." As a trade hub city, Deep Earth City's trade between the East and the West continent was of utmost importance. Although Sir Haddock was a high-grade profession and also the city lord, he still earnestly learned the language of 9 regions. After some idle talk, Sir Haddock sternly said, "I believe on the way here, my men have already told you about the situation. In the past month, more than 29 regions cultivators have been intercepted and killed in the territory of Deep Earth City, and only a few of you survived. This situation has seriously affected the order of Deep Earth City, but Deep Earth City alone is not enough to solve the problem. I need more help. Of course, I won't let you work for nothing." Sir Haddock went straight to the point and didn't waste time on pleasantries. That being the case, Wang Lu also went straight to the point. "You're the city lord of Deep Earth City, the great lord of a territory of thousands of miles. Can't you solve the security problem in your territory?" Haddock said, "If it's just a problem in Deep Earth City, I can naturally solve it, but there are deeper forces behind this matter. I believe you can also guess that the bloodstained scroll is not made by an ordinary person." Wang Lu said, "Yes, it seems that some powerful person is deliberately targeting us 9 regions people. Sir, do you have any clues?" The origin of the bloodstained scroll is very mysterious. At present there are not many conclusive clues. Half a month ago, my men sneaked into an adventure team and met a scroll merchant. The kind of scroll that can suppress the cultivators of 9 regions can be bought for only 500 magic coins. The price is unbelievably low. 500 magic coins was a sky-high price for low-order professions, but it was nothing for high-order professions. Relying on the suppression of the scroll to intercept and kill the people of 9 regions, once successful, the harvest would be 10 or 20 times more. Naturally, it would attract people like a flock of ducks. However, Wang Lu had personally experienced the overbearing power of the bloodstained scroll. The method to manipulate the law of the Western continent to suppress people was not something that could be bought with 500 magic coins. At least in the 9 regions, with Wang Lu's current cultivation base, he didn't dare to hope that he could manipulate the world's main path like this. Perhaps only the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall had this kind of ability. However, the cost of making a scroll was more than 1,000 spirit stones. 500 magic coins, which was equivalent to 500 spirit stones, was basically a losing business. It should be because they don't want to expose their existence. Wang Lu speculated, using the scroll to incite the neutral adventurers to intercept and kill the people of 9 regions, while hiding behind the scenes. But what's the benefit of doing this? No matter how many people of 9 regions die, the spoils of war will still belong to the adventurers. If they sell the scroll, they won't even be able to recover their capital. Haddock said, "I was also puzzled by this at first. Generally speaking, there are only 2 kinds of people who would do this. One is the extremists who hate everything in 9 regions. However, in recent years, extremists have become fewer and fewer. Moreover, if they want to do something, they won't hide their heads and show their tails. They would rather fight in front of the public so that more people know their ideas. The other kind is the followers of some evil god, who use special rituals to please their god, but there are many things that don't make sense. It wasn't until 10 days ago that I realized that I was confused and didn't notice an obvious clue. Wang Lu asked, "What's wrong?" Sir Haddock somewhat wryly smiled and picked up a report on the table. "This is the latest trade data from my men. These days, our trade with the people of 9 regions has dropped by 70%. In addition to the situation on the Endless Sea, the biggest reason is the rapid deterioration of the public security in Deep Earth City, which makes many merchants and cultivators of 9 regions very uneasy. Although the storm on the Endless Sea has not yet subsided, many people have made up their mind to return to 9 regions. Many people have migrated to the western inland area because there has never been a killing incident against the people of 9 regions." Wang Lu gawked for a moment and then said with a smile, "Does this mean that we, the people of 9 regions, have been caught in the crossfire? In short, I suspect that there is someone behind the scenes trying to sow discord between the people of 9 regions and our Deep Earth City?" In fact, not only Deep Earth City, almost all of our eastern city-states have encountered a similar situation. Even if it doesn't happen in our own territory, if it happens in the surrounding area, it would still make people panic. Wang Lu asked, "Who can benefit from this? What enemies do your eastern city-states have?" "Our eastern city-states generally rely on trade. To do business we need to make friends. Generally speaking, we won't deliberately make enemies. But, speaking about enemies, we do have them." Haddock pondered for a moment and then said, "Have you ever heard of Holy Light Religion?" Wang Lu thought for a moment. "Is it some kind of welfare organization that specializes in women's skirt?" Haddock froze for a long time and then helplessly explained, "Holy Light Religion is the largest religious organization in the Western continent. Their power is mainly concentrated in the Western region. They believe in Holy Light and generally speaking they are a decent organization. However, in recent years they have shown a strong aggressiveness. They have no tolerance or pity for the heretics. In order to expand their power they do everything possible. If they can be conquered by force, they conquer by force in the name of holy war. Otherwise, they use various means to carry out internal destruction. For example, this bloodstained scroll is likely to be their handiwork. When it comes to the perception and manipulation of the continent's laws, who can compare to Holy Light Religion? At the same time, they have been trying to annex the Eastern Kingdom for a long time, but they haven't succeeded. So that's how it is. Since you have locked the real culprit, then immediately unite the many city-states of the Eastern Kingdom to form a coalition to crush them to death. Burn all the Holy Light Religion believers on the stake and so on." Haddock said, "The power of Holy Light Religion is too strong. We can't even protect ourselves, let alone take the initiative to attack. On the surface, they have more than 5 legendary-level powerhouses, which is far above the Eastern Kingdom." 5 legendary-level powerhouses? TSK. Wang Lu repeatedly shook his head. In 9 regions, a legendary-level powerhouse was equivalent to peak deity stage or even supreme of unity stage. A sect with 5 legendary-level powerhouses was basically the same as the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. To provoke such an opponent, wasn't that just asking for trouble? By the way, Sir Haddock said, "The destination of your trip, Taba City, is one of the holy places of Holy Light Religion, which is strictly managed and ruled. Therefore, for you, Holy Light Religion is something that you can't avoid." "What the? There's such a thing? I never said it." I also frowned. "Is there such a thing?" More than 100 years ago, Taba City was jointly governed by various countries. When did it become the holy place of Holy Light Religion? Haddock replied, 80 years ago the current pope received an oracle, saying that Taba City is the holy place of Holy Light Religion, and then dispatched Holy Light Knights to capture Taba City. Chapter 288. According to Sir Haddock, the master of Deep Earth City, Holy Light Religion has become a barrier that Wang Lu and the others could not bypass. In addition to the Bloodstained Scroll incident, they also occupied Taba City and regarded themselves as the master. In recent decades, the development of Taba City in the mainland was under the control of Holy Light Religion. In fact, after occupying Taba City, Holy Light Religion truly became the most powerful organization in the mainland. Before that, their influence was only limited to one country. There is no doubt that they have obtained great benefits in Taba City. Rumor has it that someone in the religion has been recognized by the Golden King's treasure house and became in existence similar to an administrator. Although they can't use the treasures at will, their authority is still very amazing. Wang Lu asked, "They occupied Taba City, don't the other forces have any ideas?" Haddock lightly said, Of course there are, but they were hurt, so there's no more. Although Sir Haddock said it lightly, Wang Lu could imagine that it must have been accompanied by a bloody storm. And Holy Light Religion, who had paid a great sacrifice to occupy this place, naturally would not easily let it go. However, Wang Lu didn't come here to take away the Golden King's treasure house. He only needed the key, so there was no need to fight with Holy Light Religion. The only problem was, would Holy Light Religion allow Wang Lu and the others to easily take away the immortal treasure-level key from the Golden King's treasure house that they regarded as their exclusive property? Judging from the current situation, Holy Light Religion simply wanted to get rid of the 9 regions cultivators as soon as possible. Holy Light Religion did not deliberately target 9 regions, but in their view 9 regions people are undoubtedly heretics, and sacrificing the heretics on the stake and turning them into a part of the Sea of Holy Light is a matter of course. They call it purification. Wang Lu ridiculed, like the big fish eating the small fish and the small fish eating the shrimp, is it purification? Sir Haddock said, in the view of Holy Light Religion, the world is filthy and sinful, and can only be freed by converting to the Holy Light. As for the method of conversion, kneeling down and kowtowing is conversion, and being burned into holy fire on the stake is also conversion. In any case, if you want to achieve your goal, you inevitably have to deal with Holy Light Religion. After a pause, the knight said, of course, if you want to contend against a behemoth like Holy Light Religion, it's obviously not enough, but your sect certainly can. Wang Lu was curious. You can tell who my master is. Sir Haddock explained, of course I can't see where his master is, but I at least know that a young 9 regions cultivator who has not yet crossed the threshold of a high-order profession, yet can comprehend the universal law and transform his cultivation base, his origin is most likely not ordinary. Wang Lu smiled. Sir Haddock was indeed the lord of a city. Even though he was a knight, he relied more on his brain than his physical strength. Knight, do you want to use the power of my sect to fight against Holy Light Religion? Haddock said, I'm definitely not trying to get something for nothing. I'm just taking advantage of the situation. Holy Light Religion is our common enemy, so of course, it's better to join hands to fight against the enemy. Your sect must have a powerful force in 9 regions, but it lacks local support. We have all kinds of geographical advantages in the Western continent, but our strength is not strong enough. We can make up for each other's shortcomings, so why not cooperate? Of course, I know that you may not be able to decide on this matter, but I can convey my sincerity. Not only my Deep Earth City, but also the common will of more than 30 city-states in the Eastern Kingdom. Wang Lu nodded and admitted that Haddock's argument was indeed very convincing. To be able to get the support of the local forces in the Western continent was undoubtedly very helpful. However, the price of this help was to offend the amazing power of Holy Light Religion. The pros and cons were not easy to calculate. In particular, he was very clear that the Lingjian school and even the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League had no interest in investing a lot of energy in the Western continent. After all, this was not the 9 regions and there was no 9 regions heaven and earth Dao. This place could be used as an excellent experiential learning place, but it was not a home and it would not be a home. Therefore, for all kinds of disputes in the Western continent, he just needed to look on coldly from the sidelines. For the sake of the Western continent natives, there was no need to invest precious power to pull chestnuts out of the fire. The people of the Western continent liked to expand and colonize, but the people of 9 regions were not so interested. Although Haddock's idea was good, it was doomed to be an illusion. However, the idea of joining hands was not wrong. It's very difficult to persuade the sect, but it's just a small matter, why bother the sect's elders? Seeing Sir Haddock slightly frowned, Wang Lu explained with a smile, one of the important foundations of Holy Light Religion is Taba City, and the ruling power of Taba City, on one hand, is established through many years of killing, and on the other hand, it is recognized by the king's treasure house itself. The latter is not without the possibility of being shaken. Sir Haddock frowned even tighter. Sorry, I don't quite understand. In short, it's to make the king's treasure house no longer recognize them. The inheritance left by Golden King has its own rules. Since Holy Light Religion became the administrator, it must have pleased the king's treasure house. So, as long as I do better than them, wouldn't I have the opportunity to take away the administrator position? Rumor has it that Golden King's favorite thing to do is to throw out the bounty and let the warriors under his command fight for it. He is the king who extremely encourages competition. So, it stands to reason that the administrator position of Holy Light Religion is not hereditary. Haddock nodded again and again. Yes, that's the truth. But it's easier said than done to seize the administrator position. Before Holy Light religion, for so many years, no one was able to unify Taba City and get the recognition of the king's treasure house. Wang Lu lightly interrupted, "That's because I didn't come." 3 days later, Wang Lu and the others departed from Deep Earth City. During this period, Sir Haddock, the master of Deep Earth City, accepted Wang Lu's proposal to cooperate with Wang Lu's special operations. That is, to sneak into Taba City and subvert the rule of Holy Light religion over the Holy Land. In a single sentence, this operation plan was almost like a joke, but Wang Lu was very persistent, almost stubborn, and Sir Haddock didn't want to needlessly offend a young genius from 9 regions. Not to mention that in these 3 days Wang Lu also showed his formidable strength. Perhaps in terms of level, he was just a young man who hovered before the King Pill, which was the threshold of a high-order profession. But before the King Pill, without condensing the 9 regions' great Tao into his body, his strength in the Western continent was ultimately limited. The conversion rate of cultivation base was also not 100%. But even so, he was still very strong, so strong that Sir Haddock couldn't do anything to him even if he personally made a move. As the master of Deep Earth City, Sir Haddock was also a first-class powerhouse among the 36 city-states in the Eastern Kingdom. Although he was still far from the legendary realm, ordinary high-order professions couldn't withstand his sword for more than 3 to 5 moves. Relying on his Radiant Knight's powerful body, he could sweep away thousands of troops and horses. When he swung his sword, the sword momentum was like a stormy sea, enough to destroy a city and destroy a country. Whether it was the magician's strange magic, the spirit master's rare birds and beasts, or the shaman's elemental power, he could cut them all with one sword strike. If compared to the standard of 9 regions, he was an out-and-out Yuanying stage master. Moreover, he was a middle-level Yuanying stage master. However, such a master was helpless after Wang Lu launched his original magical ability. Although he was not defeated, he was completely helpless against Wang Lu. In the inherent enchantment, Wang Lu combined offense and defense. Although his nature was more inclined to defense, he could use the power of the broken sword to continuously weaken and disturb the opponent, making Sir Haddock unable to make his move even though he had the absolute power. Occasionally, when he seized the opportunity to confront Wang Lu head-on, he found that the earth sword that he was so proud of could not disintegrate Wang Lu's 3-feet sword defense. Instead, under the counterforce he felt a faint numbness in his arm. In a one-on-one fight they were evenly matched. However, once Wang Lu joined forces with the others, whether it was Lu Li, Bai Shixian or Quan Zhihua, they would quickly gain an overwhelming advantage, forcing Sir Haddock to admit defeat. In fact, in theory, if Sir Haddock's fighting power was 10, then Wang Lu's peak level was 8 to 9, and the others were not stronger than Wang Lu. Even if the 2 of them cooperated, at most they could barely suppress Haddock. After all, fighting power was not a simple addition. Thus, in actual combat, the overwhelming advantage naturally came from Wang Lu's grasp of the battle. It was also because of this that Sir Haddock approved of his plan. Individual fighting power is basic but not the key. I am a professional adventurer. My real skill is to overcome the dangers with limited strength. After recognizing the ability of Wang Lu, Sir Haddock sent one of his deputies, Cliff, to go with Wang Lu. He was a short night walker, a high-order thief profession. He had accompanied Sir Haddock for many years. They once explored the king's treasure house together and assisted him to obtain the key treasure, which later allowed Haddock to establish his own city-state on the eastern coast and become the master of millions of people. In terms of treasure house exploration experience, he and Sir Haddock were almost equal. For Sir Haddock to send him was enough to show the importance he attached to Wang Lu. At the same time, he also sent a carriage with the mark of Deep Earth City. With the protection of the master of Deep Earth City, they did not encounter any trouble along the way. It was not that the prestige of the master of Deep Earth City was enough to deter the small fry, but everyone understood that it was one thing to intercept a group of 9 regions cultivators who had no foundation in the Western continent, but another thing to make a move against the people of the Eastern city-state. Half a month later, the carriage of the master of Deep Earth City, carrying Wang Lu and his team, crossed the Eastern city-state, entered the central region of the Western continent, and came to the outside of Taba City. Taba City, the paradise of Western continent adventurers. With the ruins of the king's treasure house as the center, after thousands of years, a huge city-state was formed. Within a radius of thousands of miles, there were countless large and small towns and villages. And these were all for the service of the towering city in the center, Taba City. It was a city far more magnificent than imagined. Compared to it, Sir Haddock's decades of hard work, Deep Earth City, which occupied the port trade hub, seemed particularly small. The population of the city was probably in the millions. Previously there was no absolute ruler in Taobao City. When it was governed by a number of countries, it seemed scattered. But now, after it was designated as the Holy Land by Holy Light religion, the power was unified, and it burst out in astonishing pressure. Standing at the city gate, Wang Lu seemed to see an endless sea of holy light. And, standing above the sea of holy light, the Golden King who was at a higher place. In his ears, he seemed to hear the laughter of the ancient king. "Bastards, do you want my treasure? Then go and get it. I put everything in the king's treasure house." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.